Coming up, Scott Murphy from All 90s Action All the Time and New Horror Express is going to be joining us. We'll be talking about Shadow Man, the Steven Seagal DTV classic. Can I call it a classic? I don't know, but definitely Steven Seagal DTV flick, which I know people really like us talking about Seagal DTV, and I think this one's definitely going to live up to that. We have a really great conversation coming. And then next week, we're going to continue the DTVC extra look at the Marvel Cinematic Universe Phase 1 with Iron Man 2 and Thor. Kind of similar to what we did with the last episode where we put a lot of context involved. Of course, at this point, the context is going to be more sort of relative to that time. We're not going to go back in the past as much like we did, sort of setting the stage in that previous one. This one's going to be more of like kind of what was going on in the film industry at that time. The other thing that's going to be interesting, of course, is that Thor and Captain America both come out in 2011, and so kind of almost be splitting it in 2011, kind of like it'll be kind of like 2010, 2009, 2010 into 2011, and then we'll kind of pick 2011 back up when we finish the series, looking at Avengers as well in 2012. And then in 2 weeks, Ty from Co-Opus is going to be back on. We're going to be looking at two John Malkovich DTV movies. We'll be looking at Mind Cage and One Ranger. So planning tentatively right now to have that one in 2 weeks. So Ty and I still have to record that one. We have had to push things back a little bit due to scheduling, but I think we're still going to be on target for that. If not, of course, we could shuffle some things around. But yeah, that'll be the plan. And then in 3 weeks, we will have our final DTVC extra when we're going to finish up the Marvel Cinematic Universe looking at Captain America First Avenger and the Avengers. So that ought to be fun there, too. And then, of course, like I said, going into February, we're not going to be doing any more DTVC extras at this point. So at this stage, I've pretty much scheduled through February. And, of course, I'm not sure exactly how those episodes are going to work because my goal is to still try to get Ty on at least once a month for us to be able to talk, do our kind of a two-movie thing. So what we're looking at for next month with that two-movie thing, Savage Salvation is finally available on Hulu. So that's one that we've been wanting to do for a while. It's got De Niro in it, Jack Houston, also Malkovich as well. That's one we've been really wanting to do for a while. It's finally on Hulu, so I think we're going to probably give that one a stab in February. And then we might do, I think it's Assassins. That was the one I think it's like the last Bruce Willis movie that he had released. We might do that one. We're not sure exactly, but that's my goal, is to kind of get one of those a month in with Ty, and then kind of schedule the other ones around whenever that episode is that Ty and I do. But yeah, definitely, I've got about 4 or 5 guests booked between the end of January into February. So we at least have the bookings ready to go to make February our first ever, weekly month with no solo podcasts in there. So really excited to see that happen. And kind of, excited to see, what everybody's feedback is and, kind of see, we've got some really, really great topics coming up. Just to give you a sense of some of the ideas that we have in mind. I think we're going to hope to have Mitch from Video Vacuum on to talk about Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance. I almost said Ghost Rider 2, but I guess it's just Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance. So kind of furthering on some of this comic book stuff, talking about that one there. Todd Liebnow from Forgotten Films cast. He's going to be on. We're going to be looking at Welcome to Willits, a Dolph Lundgren flick. And then Will from Exploding Helicopter, he's going to be on, and we're going to be looking at a couple of Vinnie Jones films. So that should be fun just because, I think from an American standpoint, right, we're so used to NFL and NBA players that go into movies, but you don't see a lot of soccer players or European football players going into the acting realm, whereas Vinnie Jones did. Of course, he was known probably most famously, right, for grabbing Paul Gascoigne's grapes when he was when he was covering him. So there's that one there. Also, Sean Malloy from I Must Break This podcast, looking to get him on to talk about Replicant, the Van Damme movie. So we haven't had Van Damme on in a long time, so that'll be fun to talk Van Damme with him. And Tom Joliffe, the screenwriter, looking to have him on to also talk Dolph, Army of One. So those are some ones that we've got booked, kind of tentatively going into the future, and hopefully we'll have those, between February into March. You can look forward to those episodes there. All right, now the site. What do we have going on with the site? So this weekend, I'm going to finally review Astro. So my plan is to watch that, hopefully tonight. I have to confess, I've gotten into basketball a lot this year. So I don't know if you remember last year, right? The problem was I was into the NHL too much and I was watching too many NHL games and not watching enough movies. Now I'm into the NBA. The NBA, for people that aren't fans of sports or don't know enough about, especially American sports, the NBA right now, I would say it's probably the most exciting that it's been since the early 90s when you had like Michael Jordan, Charles Barkley, and all of those players at that time. This is probably the best it's been since then. So it's been really, really exciting. I just went this past weekend up to Brooklyn to watch the Brooklyn Nets play, so a live game. So I've seen, the Celtics play. I've seen the Philadelphia 76ers play down here in Philadelphia. So I took the train up to Brooklyn and saw that. And I'm also going to try to get a trip up. I got a plan to go up to New York to see the Knicks play. They play in Manhattan. So, probably end of this month. But yeah, it's been really exciting. And so I've been watching more basketball. And, like last night, I probably could have watched Astro last night, but I fell asleep watching the Suns and Clippers play on the West Coast in the U.S. So, so I mean, that's one of the other interesting things about watching sports here in America. So when you're on the East Coast, there's you get kind of 2 games a night. You get the East Coast games that happen at 7:30. And then the West Coast games, because it's 3 hours different, right? They start at 10:30 my time. So you always get kind of those 2 games like that. And so, yeah. But it means there's no time for me to watch movies like I should be doing. So I am going to rewatch Astro and get that review so we can get another Gary Daniel review on the site. I think the other problem is that movie wasn't all the most unremarkable from what I remember. So, but it has a lot of names in it. It's also got like Michael Pare in it, Dominic. I'm trying to think. I think Dominic Swain. I think it's got a bunch of names like that in it. Got it on my obviously checking. That's right. Not just Dominic Swain and Michael Pare, but also Louis Mandylor, who seems to be in everything. Right. Pretty soon he's going to be like Danny Trejo, right? Just get into the Hall of Fame, being on the 30 Club. So so we've got those coming. Next week, I'm going to do Gunfight at Rio Bravo, which is one that Ty and I covered on a previous podcast episode. So that was one that it wasn't directed by Art Camacho, but he did the fight choreography on it, but also has Hall of Famer Olivier Gruner and Matthias Hughes in it. So it's one of those Alexander Nevsky vanity projects, kind of how those goes. And again, we discussed it on the podcast, but I'm going to review it for the site. And then also Hunting Games, the CT flick that speaking of Danny Trejo, had Danny Trejo in it. That's one that it was directed by the same person who did Most Dangerous Game that also had CT in it. So yeah, I'll be reviewing that one for the site. And then we get into February. I don't have those ones watched yet, but looking to do films. So just kind of give you a sense of what we've got going on into February. Some of the movies that we've got that we'll be looking at here. I thought I had my watch list. There we go. It's one of those things with if you're using the app on Letterboxd, of course you want to be hearing me describe this in real time. But I've kind of got my lists available that I can pull from. But yeah, depending on when you last opened and edited one, it moves it in the list of one. So anyway, but yeah, just to give you a sense of what we'll be looking at, The Commando, Michael Jai White, going to be it's on Tubi. Michael Jai White and Mickey Rourke will be doing that one in February. Deadly Impact, Fred Williamson film. I'm looking to do that one in February. Murder City with Mike Coulter. I saw that was a Tubi original. It looked really good, so I'm looking to kind of get that one in. And a movie called Equal Standard that Ice-T did, and the writer of that film was actually murdered not long after it in Long Island City, Queens, New York. So that'll be a good one to cover there. So that's kind of what we got going on for February as we get into there. But some of those I haven't watched yet. So if you go to the watched films, one that I have, I can't remember what do I call that one? Upcoming reviews watched. That's the list on Letterboxd. You'll only see up through Hunting Games, and then you can go to the watch list and see some of the other ones that I've got going on there. So yeah, one of my goals this year is to hopefully get all that watch list that I have, finally get it cleared out and kind of pick up on some of those ones that have been sitting in there for a long time. Now other news about the site. In terms of the alphabetical archive, I've been taking essentially 1 month a night and just updating the archive with that. So one of the interesting things is when we get into 2020, around May of 2020, I was doing about 12 to 15 reviews a month, and that lasted through until about September. And then the amount of reviews just fell off. I think October I did 7, and then from there it was maybe 1 or 2. I think I did 1 in November and 2 in December, something like that. So I kind of fell off and wasn't reviewing as much. But there's that period in the summer of 2020, which I think is that's that period where the pandemic was still going on, but it wasn't like this full-on lockdown kind of thing, right? If you remember in the summer of 2020, it was that period where people were outside more because we realized you could be outside. So everybody was eating outdoors, right? Restaurants were all converted so that they had outdoor eating. And so things had opened up a little bit, but not completely, right? For example, Major League Baseball, they didn't have fans in their games, especially here in Philadelphia. We didn't have fans going to the games. A lot of sports were kind of just sort of picking up casually, that kind of thing. So I had a lot more time on my hands, I guess, all that to say. And I just self-published my novel, Chad and Accounting, so I also wasn't really working on writing the same way that I kind of, have been since then. So yeah, I was just doing a lot of reviews at that time. So yeah, it's interesting that there was that period. I don't know if I'll ever get back to a period like that again, but if I can always get like 5 or 6 in a month, I think that'll always be the goal. But anyway, just to kind of say that as I'm recording this, up through May of 2020 has been updated into the archive, so we're that caught up now. Also, the most recent review that I did, which it's funny, I just did that review over the weekend. I can't remember what it was. Corrective Measures, the Bruce Willis, Michael Rooker film. That one is in the archive as well. So going forward, every new post I do will also get added to the archive. Now, I can't say that for sure about Astro when I review that this weekend, because I'm going to be away this weekend. So it might be that I update it like when I get back on Monday night. But at the very least, every new review going forward is going to be updated in the archive as well. So eventually, hopefully within the next couple months, I'll have the archive completely updated, and you can just go into that alphabetical archive and just look for a film, know alphabetically, find it, and then just click the link and it'll take you right there. That archive is listed underneath all of my novels on the sidebar. So if you're using a mobile device, the best thing to do is page to the very bottom and click on View in web browser, and that will give you all of the options that people who are accessing the site on their computer can see. So there are a lot of things you don't see just when you're just using the mobile device unless you click View web browser. So anyway, so that part is there. I'm also still working on updating the old post to get rid of the Map Movie Guy links and the Photo Bucket links. So at this point, I think I've done about 24 of those. Haven't quite been keeping up to that 3 a day that I was hoping to do. So I fell in a little bit behind on that, but still, 24, that means, I guess I've still got maybe another, 900 so to go, 940 maybe left to update. So we'll kind of keep working on with that. I have noticed a few things as I've been going through there. First off, there are movies that I just don't have screens for, right? So a lot of times I'm just updating the cover photo that I have to make it bigger and a little bit nicer there. Also, one of the things I didn't realize is that with those older posts, I had started back with Boa versus Python to put in all of those hyperlinks. And I think I had stopped after a certain point, which actually has worked out because that's fewer, links that I have to remove there. So it's really mostly just the photo bucket links so far. At a certain point, right, I'm going to get to a point where I was putting in all that HTML code for links and stuff like that for those bad Matt Movie Guy links that I'll have to take care of. But, again, it has been a nice process. It's been a bit of a cathartic process to sort of remove those photo bucket and be able to look on the list of posts and not see those watermarks for those ones. So it is one of those things that I'm hoping is going to be, hopefully I'll probably be done with it by the end of the year. It's going to be about a year-long process, but it is nice to kind of be doing it and going through that. And so, again, sort of getting that blog back to what it used to look like. So yeah, something that kind of moving along with that, and hopefully we'll probably by the end of the year, we should have everything updated and back where it was. Way back, before when I was using PhotoBucket, it was just such a great deal. I would go on PhotoBucket and I would upload all my images there, copy the HTML code, and then paste the HTML code to the site. So essentially what I'm doing is, if that review didn't have images and there are images, if the movie's streaming, I'm getting new images and putting them in there. If in some cases I actually had gone back and updated the image page with new images, so I'm just taking the ones from the image page and putting them on the site. So in some cases I already have the images available. So it depends on how much is available or how much I need to add on how long it takes me to go through those. So that's just to give you a sense there. But yeah, again, hoping to have the site completely back up in order. So again, if you're on the site and you ever see those Map Movie Guy links, just ignore them completely. You shouldn't click on those ever. And I'm hoping to just sort of get those out sooner rather than later, and we can kind of not have to worry about what you're clicking on when you're on my site going forward. All right. And then of course the novels, Don's House in the Mountains, definitely, by all means, get in there and check that out. If you you can find the links here in the podcast description. Always great for people to pick that up. Also, Bainbridge, again, the short action novel. I think that's definitely something that is worth reading. Interesting thing happened to me over the weekend. I attended this sort of this writers meetup thing here in Philly, and it was one of those things where I kind of submitted some of my writing to kind of see what people thought of it. And one thing I realized is that it was like about 7 other people there, and they did not really get my writing style. It wasn't, I could tell, like, kind of as I was listening to their comments, some of the comments were good in terms of like ways that I could improve my piece, but other times it was like, okay, they're not really digging, they don't really get it the way I write, and I think that's one of the reasons why I think Bainbridge is something that people who are listening to this podcast and who read the blog and really enjoy reading my writing, I think Bainbridge is one that you really like, because it kind of marries both things. I can understand maybe with my novels, somebody thinking like, okay, I'm not really into literary fiction. It's not really the kind of thing I read. I'm coming to Matt's site because I want to talk about action stuff, and I like the way he talks about that. But I think if you're a fan of my writing style and you enjoy reading my posts, I think Bainbridge is something that you would enjoy. I think it's something that you would like. And I think that going to that writers meetup thing just reaffirmed it, that like, okay, that I have a style of writing that connects with some people, doesn't connect with others, right? Some people really like it. Some people look at it and they're just like, I don't get what these jokes are. I don't get what this person's saying. And I think the people that have been following the blog, and the fact that, again, that the blog did better last year than it had in any year, and it's doing well so far this year as well, shows that my writing is connecting with people. So, I think I'm just going to, make another further plug for Bainbridge. And again, I think it's $2.99 on Kindle. So with Kindle, again, you don't need to have a Kindle device. You just need to have the app on your phone. So if you've got a Kindle app on your phone, you pick up Bainbridge. I think also, too, if you are reading it on your phone, Bainbridge is a better bet than, say, Don's House in the Mountains or my other novels, because it is shorter. It's like 30,000 words, compared to, Don's House in the Mountains is 150,000 words. So, page-wise, I think it's like 80 pages, and that's even with a bigger font. So it's a quicker, shorter read. And I think, again, if I start to get more traction with that, if more people are interested and they really like it, I might do more with the John Bainbridge character, maybe write some more tales. I do have some ideas. One idea I had was kind of a Cynthia Rothrock-like character that comes in the second movie, where there's sort of like a drug, kind of like a mix of like, with Cynthia Rothrock, but also some Showdown in Little Tokyo elements and that kind of thing. So that was an idea that I had for a second one. So I think, depending on what kind of response I get with Bainbridge, I may or may not pursue that, but we'll see. And I think that's kind of everything. So why don't we just, we'll stop here. We'll have our theme song playing, and then coming up after the theme song, Scott from All 90s Action All the Time and New Horror Express, he'll be here, and we'll be talking about the Steven Seagal flick Shadow Man. All right, we are back, and I am joined by a very special guest. I've got Scott Murphy from All 90s Action All the Time and New Horror Express. Welcome back, Scott.
Thanks for having me on again, Matt.
Yeah, now I want to kind of brief people on kind of sort of your ongoing I don't know if journey or project is the right thing, but
saga maybe.
Exactly, yes. When you first came on the podcast, a lot of times when people come on for the first time, we do a Dolph movie, and then after that you picked a Seagal film, The Keeper, and the thinking at that time was you were going to kind of on our podcast, or on the DTVC podcast, you were going to kind of move from DTV star to DTV star. So you were going to maybe try somebody else after Seagal. And then I think there's a joke that came up on Twitter about watching a certain Seagal movie. And I was like, oh, you got to watch all the DTV Seagal movies. And I think you were like, why don't I just do them all on your podcast? And so we did The Keeper, and we're going to kind of keep going on those Seagal movies.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I can't remember exactly what the joke was or what comment that I made on Twitter. I think it was something to do with there's probably certain Seagal movies I'll never get round to, such as Against the Dark, which I actually have watched this year. And then you just said to me, "Oh well, you've got to watch them all at some stage," and And that changed my thinking from jumping from DTV star to DTV star, because there's certain ones that I thought would be nice to tick off, like your Gary Daniels, your Mark Dacascos, your Cynthia Rothrock, stuff like that. But then I was like, oh well, I could just plow through all the ones I've not seen, which there's plenty I've not seen. So I thought, yeah, let's do Seagal. Let's if I'm going to watch these movies, I may as well have somebody to talk about with them. That's what I thought, because some of them you're really kind of plumbing the depths of cinema. So
Yeah, for sure. And that's kind of dovetails with another idea that I had, because the Seagal movies, when we discuss Seagal on the website, on the podcast here, those
Mhm.
episodes do tend to have more downloads and more streams. I mean, it's kind of right there with Dolph, which is interesting because Dolph, it kind of just makes sense, right? Everybody loves Dolph, but Seagal is an interesting one because it's almost like he transitioned from this really great 90s action star into this almost like joke of a thing. And I almost think that's part of the reason maybe why people like these is that they want somebody else to be discussing them and be like, did I just watch what I think I watched?
yeah, I think so. I think that's true. I think like I think there is a time that like uh I think particularly in his early films, his first 4 or 5 films, I think the people who really got into Seagal, who really liked Seagal, by and large, thought he was cool, or enjoyed his movies, pretty unironically. But I think certainly once you get into the DTV era, certainly once you get past kind of post exit wounds anyway, I think the majority of his quote unquote fan base is like an ironic. He's become like a kind of Tommy Wiseau type, kind of ironic kind of comedy figure. And I think that, yeah, many of his DTV films are so baffling, in large part because of how the movie has to fit around him and his general lack of work ethic. So yeah, I think that's that. So I think that people are like, what was that movie? And then, and then they come and listen. They watch comedy reviews on YouTube, or they come and listen to a podcast, and people will be like, "Yeah, no, no, that is the movie you watched. It's real. It's real. It happens. Not just a fever dream."
Right, exactly. And I think there's this idea. I know Ty and Brett from Comeuppance Reviews, they always say you can't make a what they call a that movie. When they refer to a that movie, they talk about like Samurai Cop or Miami
Mhm.
Connection, those or The Room, Tommy Wiseau kind of,
Yeah.
and I think the Seagal movies, the Seagal DTV movies, for the most part, I mean, there's some good ones, sprinkled in, but for the most part, they are a that movie. And the people making them, like you said, it's like maybe it's possible that everybody else involved with making the movie knows that they're making a that movie, except for Seagal, who is just like completely earnest and thinks that like, no, this is like really good stuff, and people are watching because they think he's so cool.
Yeah, I think so. Like, on a slightly different level, in terms of like a much better level of cinema, but still a kind of very similar thing, is I always feel a kind of slightly similar thing with like the Fast and the Furious movies,
Yes.
where everybody's in on the joke of what the Fast and the Furious movies are, apart from Vin Diesel. Vin Diesel thinks he's making serious action films, and everybody else realize that they're making a very tongue-in-cheek, kind of almost deliberately trashy action films, and they're beautiful for that, because like I think like maybe if they were just entirely kind of meta, tongue-in-cheek, all that kind of stuff, and didn't have that kind of Vin Diesel element, maybe they wouldn't be actually quite as entertaining, because the fact that he seems to take them so seriously as like a family drama, I think is a huge part of the appeal, as well as all the jokes and obviously the stunts and all that kind of stuff. I feel like it's a sort of similar deal, but Seagal is even further out there. He's even more detached from reality than Vin Diesel, and also just a way worse person.
Right, exactly. Well, because I think the difference between Seagal and Vin Diesel is that Vin Diesel in the fourth movie, I mean, Vin Diesel was teetering on that DTV world the same way that Seagal was.
Hmm.
And it's almost like with that fourth movie, or Paul Walker, I think really, I did the whole Scott Walker thing again that I always do, but
Oh
Pa-
yeah.
yeah, Paul Walker, he really made the fourth movie for me. I mean, he's kind of doing these really great foot chases and tailored suits, and he's holding up scenes and all of that. And the fourth movie was really the tipping point, because if the fourth movie doesn't make it, if it's not good, if it doesn't make enough money, Diesel would have been relegated to the DTV world. But because it did, it allowed for a part five to come in, and then part five, to your point, like it brings in all of these really fun characters that, like, in addition to like the Vin Diesel taking it seriously. And I mean, Vin Diesel, again, he's like taking it completely seriously, that you've got this really massive car chase scene with like a huge vault attached by a chain to the back of a car and like whipping around, and all of this stuff happening that just seems so ridiculous. And I think audiences loved it. I mean, I love that movie. It was like so
Yeah.
fun and over the top. But like, you're right that like when you watch those and you realize that like Vin Diesel is like, I'm making something serious. I'm making some serious movies here. I'm deciding that like I read that he didn't want Van Damme in one of the movies or something like that. Like he's, because like probably because Van Damme would have wanted too much control, or right, he wanted too much
Yeah,
input.
probably.
But it is kind of a funny thing that like somehow like Van Damme never, I mean, Seagal didn't quite have his Fast and Furious 5. He had exit wounds that kind of got him back into the theater, and then they tried to make it again with Half Past Dead, and it flopped. Whereas like the Fast and Furious somehow pivoted in this way in the fifth movie to become this like billion-dollar franchise. And it's almost like that kind of zigging zagging kind of thing where Vin Diesel must have just had enough, a little bit of enough, and I think again it was the Paul Walker thing. I think he allowed Paul Walker to shine more in that movie than I think Seagal would have allowed a co-star to shine. But it is kind of interesting with those two that like how those paths diverge just enough that like Vin Diesel's making billion-dollar pictures or in a billion-dollar franchise, and Seagal ends up just completely DTV pretty much from Exit Wounds, pretty much after Exit Wounds.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. But I think that Vin Diesel. I mean, as we've discussed about Seagal before, obviously, Seagal's many flaws are are kind of, yeah, are legion. But like the Vin Diesel thing, I think that, yeah, Vin Diesel is, as much as Vin Diesel has a massive ego, I think that Vin Diesel probably is a bit easier to work with um, than Seagal, particularly. And I think like, yeah, I think like there probably certain co-stars that Vin Diesel's probably good with, like a Paul Walker, because like I think it's only when, because I guess like a Paul Walker, from what I've heard about Paul Walker, seems like a pretty chill guy, and also seemed like he was more interested in just like hanging out with his family, surfing, stuff like that, than really acting. I mean, I'm sure he enjoyed acting as well. But like it seemed like he had like a good kind of life work balance, and he seems like the kind of guy who's never going to try and usurp Vin Diesel to be number one. And I think as long as you're like that and you're not like a fellow quote unquote alpha, like, you'll get on with Vin Diesel. Unlike, the thing where like him and The Rock, always wanting to be big man on set. So like as long as you're not coming with that energy of like, as long as you allow Vin Diesel to be big man on set, I think like he's probably kind of fine. If you see what I'm saying?
Oh yeah. Yeah, and I think maybe the difference between like Vin Diesel and maybe like Seagal, or even a Van Damme as well, is that I think Vin Diesel, if Paul Walker lets him be the man, Vin Diesel doesn't care maybe that like he could feel enough like, oh, this is my movie, like I think he could look at part four or even part five and be like, oh, this is enough my movie. Whereas the rest of us watching it could be like, oh, Paul Walker just turned in this really great performance here. That I think Vin Diesel can be more of a team player, I guess, in that sense. Like you said, like he needs to
Yeah.
be to be the alpha, but by the same token, he's not going to disrespect. Like I think like a Seagal, he's like you said, he's been known to be harder to work with, and I mean like he's known for hurting stuntmen, all those kinds of things that I think Diesel probably doesn't do that kind of stuff. That you're right, that like as long as you're not a rock, trying to take over a franchise and make it your own thing, or have too much say in it. If you let Vin Diesel do what he's doing, yeah, and I think in that sense that Paul Walker, like you said, he probably didn't care enough. Like he wouldn't have wanted to have it be his franchise, in that sense. But then like he turns in these really great performances that really made those movies.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I do think, because I think Vin Diesel works good in his on ensemble, and even with and I think he can even kind of know his place where he knows he's not the kind of number one guy, like in the Guardians of the Galaxy and stuff like that. So I think he can be like a good team player, but particularly with things like the Fast and Furious movies, I think he'll be fine as long as he doesn't see you as a direct threat to like his place, and like because like Paul Walker and like the other people in the kind of Fast and the Furious kind of team, um, you know, uh, like none of them, I don't think any of them he would see as a direct threat. So I think that's why he's like kind of yeah would work better in that environment, does work better in that environment than than Seagal, the man we're going to talk about much more in this podcast.
Yes, exactly. And I think another thing too with The Rock, because now that they've teased that The Rock is coming back for, is it part two of three of the of Fast X? I think there's, I
I
don't know if
think
it's a
so.
two.
Yes.
Yeah, so he's been teased to come back there, and I mean, looking at his body of work, he's had some flops. The Black Adam movie didn't do so hot. That he could use a win, and being, it's interesting, like the Fast and Furious franchise. It's so fascinating how that franchise has managed to just sort of plug along when you've got all these other franchises around. I mean, it didn't, Fast X didn't do. It was also kind of hit by the sort of the fatigue of the franchise fatigue. I think that it was hurting a lot of movies, but not quite to the degree that you're seeing, like like the Indiana Jones movie, that what was it, the Flash, some of those other movies. It's
Yeah,
interesting
they're
just
really
how
tanked.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny how that franchise has just sort of plugged along and just sort of, I mean, maybe this last one was kind of a bit of a drop in the sense that like, okay, maybe they're in trouble for doing two more as opposed to just one more movie. But it is a fascinating thing that they've been able to do this in this era where it seems like only like big like Superman, or sorry, big, superhero, or like Avatar, other, that it's sort of carved out its own franchise and somehow made it work.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the Fast and the Furious franchise is completely baffling and entirely wonderful. Like not all the movies are good. Many of the movies aren't good at all. But generally for the most part, most of them are fun. And yeah, I mean, as it's been mentioned on a million podcasts, a million film shows, YouTube channels, whatever, the fact that the Fast and Furious franchise has moved from like being a Point Break ripoff where they steal DVD VHS combo players to the fact that they now save the world like the Avengers. This is completely mental, but like, but there we go. There we go. It's
Yeah,
it's a miracle of a franchise.
it is the most amazing thing. I mean, with that fifth movie where they just went over the top with that whole heist thing at the end, because I think it was just supposed to be just another heist movie, that like they're kind of transitioning from a Point Break paradigm like you were talking about to more of a heist style. They wanted like an Ocean's 11 kind of thing, I think is what they were looking for.
Yeah.
um but it was just so over the top, and the fact that they just leaned into it so much that they were like, we're going to go even more over the top for the next one. And like you said, that like, the Rock's character is like, oh, we've got these bad terrorists here, who are we going to get to save the day? Oh, these other I don't know if terrorist is the right word for them, but these other criminals from the previous movie that I had issues with, yeah, they're going to be the ones who are going to fight these terrorists. Let's bring them into this, and away they go. And it's just, yeah, it's such a fascinating thing.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely, and like you say, it is fascinating that kind of that kind of development. We're in Point Break ripoff, kind of street racing as well movies. Then in five, we go to the kind of Ocean 11 style movie. And then after that, we go to like, they're basically like Mission Impossible movies. And like, mysterious figures from the government played by Kurt Russell are now, it's like, no, well, I know we've got all these secret agents in the field, but they're not good enough. No, get me Dom Toretto, streetcar racer and thief,
Right.
because for some reason. Yeah, okay, cool.
Right, exactly. And sure enough, he's completely at home driving a car through like a skyscraper in Dubai into another skyscraper in Dubai,
Of
or
course.
whatever it is that they're doing, and hanging off of flying helicopters and planes and all the stuff that they end up doing. And it is like one of those things where it's like, I mean, it was almost like a foregone conclusion they would have to go to space in part nine. But then there was almost a sense of like, oh, we went too far by going into space, which I don't know if that's true or not, really. Like, I know with Fast 10, they were trying to ground it more, they said. So they decided to have a huge bomb hurling through Rome. But either way.
Yeah, well, I've still not. I have seen nine of them, but I've still not seen Fast X. So I will have to. I'll have to get round to streaming that sometime in the new year, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you'll enjoy it. I think I saw it in the theater. It was my first time seeing a blockbuster like that in the theater in a long time. Like I think like sort of breaking the pandemic streak of not going to the theater. I went and saw Joel Cohen's Macbeth with
Right.
Denzel Washington, and that was like kind of a small indie theater. And then I was doing the DTVC extra Fast and Furious, and I was like, it was like lining up right for when Fast X was in the theater. And I was like, I haven't been in a while to a blockbuster. Why don't I go do that? And I think part of the fact that because I hadn't been to a blockbuster, I mean, I think the last blockbuster I saw might have been Spider-Man 3 in '07. So it's
Wow.
been a long time. I couldn't remember if I'd seen the Iron Man movies in the theater. But either way, I mean, we're talking like 15 years or so. So I think just like the noise and like the all of that stuff was so engrossing that I probably liked it more than it really was good. It might have just been more the effect of being there. They also had a drink called the Toretto Twist, and I got the sugar version that probably was very highly caffeinated as well. So I was probably like really buzzing watching the movie.
It's probably helped. Probably helped. Yeah,
Exactly,
yeah, yeah.
exactly.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but why don't we get into our to the Shadow Man here, our Seagal film. So I'll give a quick synopsis of this one, if as best as I can, which I think Mercenary, I think I ran into some trouble with our last one there. Mercenary for Justice, is that what it?
Mercenary for Justice was
Yeah.
the last one we did. Yeah.
That was yeah. I get his titles mixed up because there's just so many like moving pieces that you just sort of it's like a Mad Libs kind of thing where they're just inserting
Yeah.
things or whatever. But Shadow Man, the basic idea is that Seagal, he plays a former government agent named Jack Foster, and his apparently he's a widower, and his father-in-law has stolen some sort of virus. He's keeping it in the stylus of his PDA, or is that the term I want? PDA? No, it's public display of affection. What is the I'm thinking the palm device, whatever the
Yeah.
yeah.
I can't remember the initial
No.
the acronym for it.
Yeah.
Yes, but
Yeah,
like
we
those one of those kind of palm devices that has a stylus. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, maybe it is still PDA as well. We've come so far from that technology in only like, I guess it's been like 16, 17 years since this movie came out. But yeah, so
That's true.
he goes out to lunch with Seagal, and he swaps the stylus, which for someone like Seagal, who's usually on top of everything and knows everything that's going on around him, the fact that he fell for this is kind of mind blowing. But luckily, for everybody involved, they're going to Romania. So Seagal, the daughter, the father-in-law, they're going to Romania, which is good because we need to be able to shoot these movies in Romania, especially in the mid 2000s, and we need a reason to be there sometimes, I guess. And so while they're there, some people put a bomb in their car, but Seagal has dropped his passport, which again, someone who's usually on top of everything, somehow he's dropped his passport. But luckily, the airport that they're in just has some basic sort of like I don't know, deck chairs or whatever that's like in there, and the airport, and the daughter finds it for him. Then as they come out, woman played by Ava Pope, a cab driver, grabs the daughter, and then the explosion happens. We think that it's killing the stepfather, or sorry, the father-in-law. And so now Seagal's going to try to find his daughter and, figure out what's going on with why they wanted to kill the father-in-law. So we've got everybody involved, right? We've got CIA or government agents, we've got Russian mobsters, and then we have this mysterious Ava Pope, cab driver who is keeping Seagal's daughter. We think that she might have some more benevolent motives than everybody else in the film, but essentially it's just Seagal kind of just, going through and beating everybody up and tracking everybody down and leading us to a denouement in a library where everything comes together. The other thing is he's a Tai Chi, is that what it is? Tai Chi that he was doing? Some kind of martial arts master that is kind of like a Chekhov's thing where it's like we get it at the beginning of the movie. So if they introduce it at the beginning of the movie, he has to use it at the end of the movie, but doesn't really use it anywhere else in the film. But yeah, I guess that's kind of the basics. I don't know if I missed anything there, Scott.
No, that kind of gives the basic skeleton of the plot. It's like I think like the plot itself is not too difficult to follow. I think the character motivations are a bit more difficult to follow. The plot is convoluted. It can be difficult at times, actually. And there is certain scenes that we will talk about that don't seem to really add up or connect to anything else. So yes, I guess. But yeah, I think that overall that was a good summation of a somewhat messy and confusing plot.
Yes. Now what did you think of the film overall?
Well, I was a little bit worried going in, because I think like there are certain things that we have to do when we do one of these Seagal podcasts. You know, I noticed you did it last time when you were doing the True Justice episode with Mitch from Video Vacuum. There's certain kind of things you have to check off the checklist. First of all, you have to check off that like Seagal is a terrible person. You got to talk about that a little bit. You got to talk about the mysterious appeal of Seagal, and you've also got to mention the Seagalology book by Verne. So I'll do that here. And basically in that book, he basically says that I didn't reread the entry because I didn't want my mind clouded. I wanted to make my own judgments. But I did remember one thing from his review of it, and that one thing is basically that he said it's one of his most boring films. And I have to say, overall, in terms of the Seagal movies I've seen, and particularly since I've watched Against the Dark this year, it was and Mercenary for Justice. I think like I definitely had fun with it. It wasn't. It was not as soul sapping as Against the Dark, and it was slightly less confusing than Mercenary for Justice. So, and there is some fun moments that we in it that I think are enough to kind of be like, well, this is a bad movie, but it's like an entertaining bad movie.
Yeah. My thought when I was watching this, and because I had this, when I reviewed it way back in '09, I believe it was, or 2009, October 2009. I was like, this is a fun. It's pretty sweet, that's what I called it. I said it's extremely ridiculous, but what else do you expect with Seagal? And I think one of the things I think when you first were going to embark on this, and hey, let's watch these movies and discuss them on the podcast, I almost feel like this is the kind of movie that you probably had in mind. Not this. This is like the way this movie played out is kind of what you thought you were getting yourself in for, maybe, if that makes sense.
Yes, and like there is as well, I think, like, and I know as we probably discuss more of them, and probably particularly as we get into like maybe like the 2010s ones and as the 300 movies he did in 2016, like, so like maybe they will become more frustrating for me, but like I think there's also, particularly watching a film like this that came out in 2006, there is a certain nostalgia as well, based on like the style of cinema. Like right from the very opening, we get an opening scene where we're intercutting between this montage at a lab of like sciencey people doing sciencey stuff, and then we're intercutting with like his father-in-law kind of being very sneaky, trying to hide from secret agents and stuff like that. And we do this with this like kind of flash editing that you get the kind of flashlight on the screen, and you get a kind of whoosh sound with each edit, going whoosh, and it's so mid 2000s that
Yes.
you're just like, oh, this is very of the time. This, I know exactly, if even if I had no idea this was made in 2006, within 2 minutes of watching this movie, I'd be like, I think this came out in the mid 2000s.
Yeah, it's a very fascinating thing, and it's almost like I'm trying to think how to explain. Like you're exactly right. Like you can almost feel like it feels like a DVD movie as opposed to a streaming movie like we get nowadays. Um,
Yes, absolutely.
yeah, and it hit all those notes like you said from those mid 2000s where um, I mean it's almost like this idea that like we're somehow like I don't know how to explain it an 80s like drama where there's like a photographer, right? Where he's like in maybe like in a war torn area or like a
Mhm.
like a like a inner city area, and he's got like the 5 o'clock shadow, and the hair's a mess, and he's got his camera, and it's just sort of these shots of him taking pictures, right? And it's almost like they're shooting the movie the same way, and like especially when he's like sneaking around, when the father-in-law's sneaking around, it's almost like this idea of like where somehow there's surveillance keeping an eye on him and knowing what's happening. And you're right, because it's like it it's essentially just a series of scenes that really aren't doing anything if it wasn't for the flash and the whoosh that's supposed to tell us that, oh no, this is kind of a big deal here.
Yes, this is mysterious and exciting.
Yeah, yeah, and the director is a guy named, well, he's originally from Canada, but
Mhm.
I'm gonna use the German pronunciation of his name because it looks like he's done a lot of work in Germany. Michael Koisch, I think is how you say it, and he directed three Seagal movies, kind of right around this time, and but he does, it's like it's interesting, like he'll do like a direct to video movie in the States. I think he did these ones because if he was based in Germany, he could just go to Romania and do that. But he does Shadow Man, Attack Force, and Flight of Fury, like kind of all right together, '06, and '07. But yeah, he mostly did a lot of TV stuff, and the TV stuff that he was doing, shows like Nightman, like a lot of shows like Sliders, things like that. So it's almost like he just sort of took like what he knew from that period, and then like you said, like mid 2000s did up to give us the look that we were expecting.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, because it is directed very much um, in that style. I think obviously kind of, yeah, influenced by kind of spy movies of the time, I guess. And basically the editing is very kind of direct to video. You just know you're watching like a kind of direct to video action movie
Yeah.
of that time, and then like um, I think like obviously it's kind of influenced by kind of other kind of spy thriller type things from that time as well. Because we've got like a kind of pumping techno score, which again I feel like I feel like was very common, even from the 90s, even from kind of GoldenEye onwards, and
Yes.
then particularly with Moby doing the kind of main theme for the Bourne films and stuff like that. Like yeah, this again very of the time pumping techno score.
Yeah, and there's this sort of like this Eastern European concept, right? That like Eastern Europe is just all a series of like shady clubs, techno music, and the Russian mob. And it's like it's this sort of like this Wild West kind of thing. And that that a Seagal is almost like a his character's, I don't want to say the sheriff. He's kind of like the lone gunman who stumbles into town and sorts everybody out.
Do you think actually because you are the DTV connoisseur, so you probably know even better than me? Was there some sort of like official filmmaking law in the 90s and 2000s that if you're making a DTV action film, there has to be at least one scene in a dodgy strip club?
Yeah, I think, 'cause I joked when I wrote the review. I was like saying how, I said the idea of going to a club in Eastern Europe scares me, right? And it's like, the Russian mob, the angry vets from the Balkan Wars, and then those various other unsavory characters. And it's almost like this idea of like the people making these movies, they use the Eastern European discotheque as essentially like the dodgy saloon in the Western, right? That like,
Yeah.
like the hero, strolls into that saloon and somebody starts giving him a hard time, right? So like in the Western, it's like, hey partner, what are you doing in this part of town, right? And then all of a sudden he just gets, sorted out. Whereas in this case, I don't want to try to affect an Eastern European accent and screw it up, but it'd be like, what are you doing here? This is not place for you. What do you mean it's not a place for me? What do you mean? I'm here just hanging out just like you are. Come on, man, just let me hang out. I think you should leave now. And then all of a sudden, boom, the guy gets into an arm lock, and Seagal starts beating everybody up. It's kind of like a similar idea, I guess. And I think I joked in the review that I would only go to one of those places if former Man U striker Dimitar Berbatov was there with me. I feel like he could keep me safe from all those unsavory characters.
Do you know that's a very particular reference. I feel like um as as somebody who suffers from anxiety, I feel like that is like my dream. My dream is to be as chill as Dimitar Berbatov was on a football pitch. I have never seen a man so laid back, so casual, so
Right.
chilled out as Dimitar. It was a beautiful thing to watch. I love Dimitar Berbatov. I was like, I am a Man U fan, but like, they just, oh.
It's funny. I remember I was at a bar, a pub in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. It's an English themed pub there that you could watch the Premier League games at. And there were a couple of guys there one of the times I was watching, and they had this theory that Dimitar Berbatov was a vampire, and that's why he was so lethargic during day games. But if it was a night game, like a Champions League game, because it was the nighttime, he was so much better. So that was their theory about why he was so chill. But it didn't explain the fact that he still would score goals in those day games.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. He would.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah,
uh,
I think just that's the idea with these like the Romania thing. I think there's a combination of the fact that it was so cheap to shoot there, which nowadays, right here in the United States, with so many depressed economies in places like Michigan, Louisiana, Alabama, or whatever, it's actually cheaper to shoot movies here. That's where sort of the whole Emmett Furlow Oasis thing, where he shoots a
mhm,
lot of them
mhm.
here, but before that, he was shooting them in Romania because it was a lot cheaper. But I think a lot of these directors with these action movies, I think they draw a lot from westerns. I think they, a lot of them. I mean, this director here was born in '55. I think a lot of them were born in the '50s, early '60s. Like Keone Waxman's kind of on the younger side when it comes to these directors, and I think that's part of it. Is I think they have this sort of old west sensibility, and they see like like Bucharest as the new Wild West and the discotheque, and
Uh,
of course the
that
other
makes
thing.
that makes a kind of sense to me. That makes absolutely, because like I think there is a certain time, particularly when this movie was made in 2006, there definitely between I don't know the exact years, but I would say between probably like 2005 and 2010 or something. I think it would be hard to move around either Bucharest or Sofia for people filming DTV action movies.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, and of course, Seagal bumped between both of them so much. But yeah, I mean, people like Val Kilmer. I mean, we saw Dolph was doing movies there. I mean, yeah, they all did. The funniest thing I think between the ones in Romania and the ones in Budapest and Hungary, sometimes the ones in Budapest or Hungary, they try to play them off as like other cities in the world, and it's hilarious because like you know, Hungarian as a language, it's kind of I think it's like from the same language family as like Finnish or something. It's not an Indo-European language. So it's like
Mhm.
a lot of the signs and stuff don't look like they make no sense. Where it's like, like if you watch the movie in Romania, Romanian being a Romance language, the language kind of makes a little sense. Or, if they use like
True.
Cyrillic script, it's like, okay, we know that's Eastern Europe. It's, Cyrillic script, that makes sense. But the Hungarian ones, I think there's a I want to say there's a Scott Adkins one that was shot there that was supposed to be taking place in like Ukraine or something, and it was like so obviously not the Ukraine, with all the signs and everything that were there.
I think it is quite cool though that like this one's actually supposed to be set in Bucharest, because like obviously there's quite a lot of them that try to be, so like you say, try to be somewhere else. Like quite a lot of the Bulgarian ones that were filmed in Sofia Sofia was like supposed to be some American city and didn't look anything like an American city.
Right.
Like,
Yes. Well, there's a Seagal one that I watched recently, End of a Gun, that yeah, I think I think Bucharest was supposed to pass as Paris. And it's like
oh,
they're both, beautiful looking European cities, but Paris is, one of those cities like, New York or London's and that are like the city's a character in the movie. And so you can't really pass another city off for it.
I think like the problem with Paris as well is that Paris, like New York and London, is a city that you've seen in films so much that
Yeah.
you're very familiar with the feel of it and the vibe of it and the look of it. So it's hard to pass off any other city as being one of those ones because I think like after like I think Paris is probably the most filmed city in Europe anyway, I think. Or it's either that or London, I guess. But yeah, so I think like yeah, it's always difficult to kind of pass one of those cities off as something, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and you make a great point too that there really wasn't much of a stretch in this movie to base this in Bucharest. Like it's not like we were watching this and being like, why would they be going to Bucharest? Why does anybody need to be in it's like we were completely fine with the fact that they shot in Bucharest and said they were actually in Bucharest. So maybe for filmmakers out there, if you're going to Eastern Europe anytime soon to shoot your movie, we're okay with the movie taking place there. It doesn't have to be a stand-in for an American city or anything like that.
Yeah, because like there were there's many questions I asked myself about this film of like why did that character do this and all that, but at no point was I like hung up on the fact of like right, so like Seagal's American, his wife it seems like is probably American, his father-in-law is American, like why are they celebrating the third anniversary of her death in Bucharest? Like what is the importance of Bucharest? What's the significance of Bucharest in their lives? That wasn't a hang up for me. I was just like, sure, they're in Bucharest. That's fine.
Right, exactly. Exactly right. Right. There are a lot more things that we could accept. And so yeah, and maybe it's a good time for us to get into some of those things that were a little bit harder to get in the film. I think the biggest one for me is just at the very beginning where we get this hilarious scene where Seagal is training people, which it just seems like getting trained in martial arts by Seagal just seems to be him beating the crap out of you for an hour. And it's like, why would I be paying for the the why would I be paying for that at all? And in this case, we have he's showing them like the power of chi and how to harness your chi to do things. And the guy's like, can you show me how to like do like a chi punch or something like that? And Seagal like sort of gathers his chi and then just punches him through the wall, which I can't even imagine like why one why I would pay for that, but two like his insurance costs must be through the roof.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I like that scene becomes even like obviously we're going to talk about the movie I guess so like I know you usually spoil movies. That's fine. So just spoilers for anybody who's not seen the movie. But that scene gets even more confusing by the end of the movie. So basically, before he punches this guy through a wall, he's demonstrated the different ways that you can use chi and the different ways you can harness the chi and use either external or internal damage and like he uses the internal damage example on a watermelon. So like I mean this movie starts off with one of the greatest scenes in cinematic history where Seagal punches a watermelon and it doesn't affect the front of the watermelon where he punches, but it affects the back of the watermelon. So the back of the watermelon explodes and is all pulpy and on the outside. And the guy like looks at it and goes kind of like, "Oh Jesus!" So and then the other guy asks how to do that technique, and then Seagal apparently shows him and like punches him into the wall. Which at the time when you're watching that at the beginning of the movie, you're like, well, probably he didn't do the same thing he did on the watermelon. But so the guy's probably just knocked out or whatever. But then at the end of the movie, he does the same technique on somebody else, which I won't reveal right now because we'll talk about the end of the movie kind of towards the end. But and like he kills him.
Right.
So at the end of the movie, I thought about the start scene again, and I was like, so did he kill that student? Like, is that student dead?
Yeah.
And then I guess like the thing that makes this scene even more hilarious is after Seagal does this and uh, kills his student question mark, um, he then beats up the rest of the class. And well, he doesn't beat up the rest of his class. The obvious body double beats up the rest of the class because suddenly Seagal is very lean and looks like above the law Seagal, and you're like, well, that's not 2006 Seagal. That is a very clear body double. And I think one of the funniest thing about this movie is like there's so much obvious body double work. It is unreal.
Yes. Yeah, it's what now I don't know if anybody else has used I don't know if like out loud, I can't remember if anybody else has used it, but I know Ty from Comeuppance has used the term fake shemps that
Yeah.
he'll either use for Seagal or Bruce Willis, that with the doubling. But the idea was that Shemp in the Three Stooges, I can't remember if he died or if he was like really sick, but they had to keep shooting the shorts without him. So they just put
Yeah.
in a bunch of fakes that look like him, and so the term fake Shemp was sort of born there. And but he always talks about the fake Shemp aspect of these movies. And I mean, this one is pretty heavy duty. It's like later on he talks with the U.S. ambassador, who of course I didn't know this was the case, but I guess ambassadors they're not just sort of these figurehead roles, but actually ambassadors are involved in all of the sort of shenanigans that go on behind the scenes with the Secret Service and all of that in the countries that they're living in. So that's an interesting thing. I didn't realize that, but she apparently all of her scenes that she was supposed to be doing with Seagal were a double, and so it's one of those things where you're just like, and apparently she wasn't happy about it that she didn't act with him in a single scene. She was like, "What am I doing here if I'm not, like what is the point of this?" It's amazing the volume of double work that we get in this, and this is one of the earlier ones I think where you start to get that massive amount of double work.
Yeah, I think so. From what I've read and from what I've seen, because I've seen a few of his movies before the DTV movies before this, like Out of Reach and no, hang on, Out for a Kill. I think
Yeah,
Out of Reach is before this as well, actually. Um, and Into the Sun and Belly the Beast. And I think there is less body double work in those ones, if I
yeah, because
remember correctly.
yeah, Out
Um,
of Reach is like a little bit after. He plays a character named William Lansing, which I guess is a Michigan.
yeah,
Yeah. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, he's yeah, I can't remember which one it was. Was Out for a Kill? I think is the one where he plays a professor, which is funny enough in
That's
itself.
right. He's the archaeologist. He's the famed archaeologist. Like,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and he kills a man at the end of the film. Sorry, this actually I don't think is a spoiler for anybody who hasn't seen Out for a Kill. This is the reason to watch Out for a Kill. Is that at the end of the movie, the baddie is running away, and so Seagal grabs a samurai sword off the rack of samurai swords that just happen to be there, and he opens up the window and throws the samurai sword out the second story window and beheads the guy who's running away on the street below. It's one of the, like you talked about the watermelon being one of the finest things to ever hit cinema. This is definitely up there as well. It's one of the most beautiful things I'd ever seen.
That is true. And Out for a Kill, like the second reason to watch Out for a Kill is again one of cinema's all-time peak scenes. Um, Basically, Seagal has a fight in that movie where there's this guy doing kind of this very elaborate wire work, and Seagal does the whole fight sitting in a barber's chair. It's it's genius.
Yes, absolutely. So and Out for a Kill is '03. So it's like
Yeah,
you can see where this is heading, and Shadow Man is definitely it, if you watch Out for a Kill in '03 and you watch some of the other ones, the Foreigner I actually liked, which is actually before Out for a Kill, but that's when I felt like that one like pulled on some really great like Le Samurai vibes and things like that. Very interesting one, but different one. But as you get into like Belly of the Beast, Into the Sun, those kind of things, you can see where we're headed. And Shadow Man is definitely, if you're sort of, driving on the highway there and you start seeing the signposts, Shadow Man is coming up. It's like Shadow Man in 3 years. You know what I mean? Like you just know we're getting there. And so it's like it's a natural. And then of course, as you kind of go along, we go to some of these later ones that we've seen. Same thing. It's almost like if you go through his IMDb, they're just like little highway markers that you just know where you're headed to, where you get to the late 2010s where he ends up.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I just like thinking more about the kind of opening scenes of this movie though. Like they don't really sell Seagal's character as being like like a massively likable character in the beginning. For being our hero. Like, our introduction to our hero is he beats up all of his students in his class. He doesn't seem to teach them much. He just enjoys beating them up and apparently kills one. Um and and then it cuts to him at home. And like he has a brief conversation with his daughter, seems to love his daughter. Okay, that's a tick in the likable column. Then he has a weird conversation with his girlfriend, um, where his girlfriend's like trying to get his attention, and while he's on the phone, um, and he says this line. Basically, she says, "Are you stop ignoring me, or are you ignoring me?" Something like that. And then he says, "Why shouldn't I ignore you?" As if to say that your presence really isn't that much. I don't really care that much about your presence. And then she like whips off her dress and is completely naked, and then kind of wanders away naked, as if to say, "Now you get the point." She actually says that. Now you get the point. And then he's like, and then he slowly gets up off his chair, very lackadaisically, and is kind of like, "Oh yeah, I guess." And the thing is, first of all, he's basically saying, "I'm going to ignore you, apart from when you're giving me sex." And second of all, he acts as if the act of him giving her sex is like some sort of like massive favor to her. So like it's not. It seemed like a jerky kind of moment. I feel like I don't know if you reacted the same way to me. I was just like kind of like, wow, this guy seems like kind of a dick.
Well, I also compounded on the fact that the scene before that, he's with his father-in-law talking about his deceased wife and the father-in-law's deceased daughter, and he's talking about how he's not fully over it yet and he still thinks about her and all of this stuff. And it's like kind of like this complete shift to like, oh, but yeah, it kind of seemed like you had moved on. You're telling the father-in-law that you hadn't moved on yet and all that stuff, but yeah, you seem like you're doing okay. And part of me think that might just be Seagal being like someone who just like doesn't get it. Like it does kind of make me interested to see like if he, I know he's been married before, but like if he had a spouse or someone that he would like really care that much about, that like if they passed, that he would be over it soon or something like that. But it kind of just like it made the whole jerkiness even worse because it was like it's almost like he lied to the father-in-law about how how broken up he was about his wife passing. It was kind of more just like, yeah, no, I'm doing all right for myself now.
Yeah, because it didn't seem like a totally fresh relationship. Because like the other thing is like the daughter seemed to know this woman. So it's been around for a while. There didn't seem to be any kind of friction around this woman being here. So like the daughter, it must have been long enough that the daughter's kind of used to this woman being here. So like it was like,
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, so, and it's interesting how this, because usually the way Seagal endears himself in a movie, and that might be one of the reasons why this movie, why he started doing more of this in later movies. Usually, the way he endears himself is that you've got some woman in a situation where she's being attacked by some guy. Maybe there's such a human trafficker or somebody like just a jerky boyfriend or something, and he just kind of does his slap chop thing and gets him in some wrist locks and throws him around and stuff. And that's how we like him, right? Because he's saving the day with a woman, or somebody who's disadvantaged, that he's helping them out. And this movie doesn't have any of that. Like you said, it's him beating up his students and then like hooking up with some woman after being a jerk to her. So that's another interesting fact, is that it's almost like he knows he's a jerk and he has to put these pieces in the sort of like, hero in a can kind of thing, sort of, pop it
yeah.
open and we've got ourselves a ready-made hero. And he didn't really do that this time. He didn't employ the hero in a can approach.
No, not at all. And I guess like this is kind of like um like the middle ground of like I think as we discussed in the Keeper that he's like did the kind of White Knight type thing, the kind of hero in the can thing that you're kind of discussing. But and this is kind of somewhere between that and the kind of more kind of burnt out characters he would play in the likes of Urban Justice and A Dangerous Man and Driven to Kill things like that are like more kind of are like ex-cons and people corrupt cops and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's interesting, like kind of the the movies themselves had a tone to them, right? That were all the same. Like you said, like this movie, you can kind of pick this one out and just be like, this is a mid-2000s Seagal flick. And most of his movies in that period had a very certain had a certain tone to them. And it's almost like the tone starts to change a little bit as he kind of gets kind of more out there and more full of himself as we get into the 2010s. And but these earlier ones, there's a little bit of a mix of things, like you said, that like he you could pick out some of the tropes, you can pick out some of the classic Seagal things and kind of make fun of them, but it's almost like for whatever, like he almost, I don't want to say he leaned into them as he got further on. It's almost like he felt like he needed them more in the later ones. It was like, I can't make a movie without these things in it, and I'm not going to do anything else in the movie.
I think like one thing in terms of that, in terms of like the Seagal rule book, I think that one thing that disappointed me slightly is we didn't get the kind of classic Seagal info dump scene.
Hmm.
We basically we get one scene where Harry, his kind of old friend, that is good or bad or both possibly. It's very confusing.
Right.
But he says like that Jack is not a guy to fuck with, and
Right.
then and he says that like a couple of times, but we don't get the classic like somebody opens a file and it's like, oh my God, Jack Forrester, he's got 5 Purple Hearts, and he's trained in, he's an expert marksman and swordsman and knife fighter and hand-to-hand combat, and oh my God, I think and just the list goes on and on and on forever. So we don't get that, and I always love that scene in the Seagal movie. It always makes me laugh.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree there. Yeah, because like the closest, like you said, is that Harry guy. It's like when they talk about him, it's like they all know him already, and
Yeah.
and so it's almost like his reputation precedes him. Yeah, it's interesting. There's a character named, or there's an actor named Howard Dell, who's in the later Seagal movies, who's like this, like he's always like a company man kind of guy, and he a lot
Mhm.
of times he's the one who does that part. He's the one who's like talking to his bosses or whatever, and they're like, what do you know about this guy, this John Alexander or Jonathan Cold or whatever? What do you, well, he's da, 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 da. Like you said, he's got the file out and he's like going through it all and stuff like that. And yeah, this movie, that Harry character is supposed to be that guy, but he doesn't quite do it. Like you said, it's almost like they're all talking about Jack Foster, like they all know him, and he's kind of just like this larger than life kind of guy, but they all get it. And then, well, it's like he's larger than life, and then like some people buy into it, other people are like, the hype can't be true, right? Like you said, that one guy who, there's this one guy who's like oh, I don't believe that karate stuff works well in the movies, but I don't really buy it here, which is the irony, right? Because you're all in a movie, so this means it's going to work. Which that was the first thought that I had. It's like, yeah, well, since you're all in a movie, that means that his karate stuff's actually going to work on you. So, but then that's when that Harry guy's like, he'll fuck you up, blah, 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 blah. So, yeah, it was interesting, like how, like you said, that info dump part of it is kind of the most fun, because it is like this whole thing of like Seagal and like some backwater like Louisiana, like bayou bar, eating or playing his guitar or something, and some dude shows up to try to get him back, and have him do one last job or something like that. And that's when we find out all the stuff in his background.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And like we got like a really classic one in The Keeper where, a woman comes round and it's like, every person who comes to the academy, wants to be you.
Yes. Yeah. Well, because it's
Uh,
interesting, because that's only 3 years. And one of the interesting things actually about The Keeper is that when I reviewed this movie on the site in October of '09, because I didn't know The Patriot was direct to video at that time. So I thought I had done all of his direct to video movies to that point, and The Keeper was the next one to come out that I hadn't reviewed yet, and so I ended up doing stuff. But at that time, we were waiting for The Keeper to come out when I reviewed this one, and it is interesting how he starts leaning into certain things with The Keeper that this movie he hasn't quite gotten there on yet. So it's like, the younger woman kind of thing. Like he's kind of just sort of, he has a girlfriend or whatever, and he ends up, we think he may have hooked up with Ava Pope. He may not have. There's kind of a really weird scene there that we can get into in a bit about that situation. But it's like the difference between '06 and '09. It's like '09 is sort of like that transition period where we start to get into the really bad stuff in the 2010s. And it is interesting how like some of those pieces, like you talked about, like the info dump and some of the other things. And then, I mean, him hooking up with a girl who's like, I mean, that's the one thing about Ava Pope we can say is that she's not young enough to be his daughter.
I was going to mention that.
Yeah.
I was going to mention that. Like in terms of like the age differences in Seagal movies, like that's not but is one of the better ones because like
Right.
I was looking it up and like obviously this would have been filmed in kind of like 2005, so Seagal would have been about 53 at the time, and Eva Pope or Eva Pope, I'm not quite sure. She would have been about 38 at the time. So like so it's like kind of, like 15 years, it's a bit closer than normal, it's not like the usual kind of
Right.
ridiculous kind of like, yeah, like you say, could be the father or by this stage grandfather like
Yeah, it's an interesting point because I know like the what was the one he did, I think it was called a Dangerous Man, or no, not that one. No, uh maybe it was a Dangerous Man. No, it's yeah, maybe no, it's not Dangerous Man. I'm getting it screwed up. A Good Man. It's a different, but it's still A and a man, but it's a good man. And that was made in 2014. The girl that he hooks up with, she was born in '87. So that's like a
wow,
good
that's younger
30.
than me.
Yeah,
Jesus.
right, exactly. It's a good 35-year difference there. And so, there's definitely, I mean, and a lot of, and that one that's just that's a one that it would be an interesting one for us to do. It's a fascinating one. There's so much going on with that one that we could definitely spend a whole episode on that one. But you're right. That's kind of more in line with what his girl. But the thing is too is like he has these really awkward, weird love scenes too. And maybe we'll get into the Eva Pope scene where it's like she just sort of shows up. And so to give people an idea of what's happening here is that she stashes the daughter with her friend and then comes to Seagal and says, "Okay, well, I can get you your daughter back if you can give me some papers to get me out of the country." Because for whatever reason, she's stuck in Bucharest. I guess because she was an agent herself and she got burned, I think, right? And her family was killed. I think that was what
Yes.
happened. Yeah.
That's what happened.
Yeah. Okay. So then she's using the daughter as leverage for Seagal to get her papers to get her out of the country. So he agrees to that, and so then they're like they're at this like sort of stash house thing, and they there's this weird like scene where they're spending the night and she just sort of shows up where he's on the couch and she just shows up with like just her bra and panties on, but she gives him this like blank stare, which I likened it to Steven Tyler in the Run DMC video, that Walk This Way video, and they sit down and he's just like saying stuff like, apparently the line was, you act like you piss ice, so you want everybody to think you piss ice, which I thought it was you're cold as ice. I think I misheard it, but anyway, she starts crying and he just starts like kind of gives her a hug or something, like he's like her dad or something. So it's like with all these times where he's with these women that he's old enough to be their dad, it's actually someone who's closer in age to them and he has like a fatherly scene with, which was really interesting. But yeah, we're gonna take a quick break here, but yeah, we'll be back in a little bit, and yeah, we'll keep talking about some Shadow Man. So be back in a bit. It's the early 90s in LA. The war on drugs is raging, and Detective John Bainbridge is the LAPD's secret weapon against crime. Former Special Forces in Nam, he's a cop on the edge. When he and his partner Geary uncover a potential human trafficking ring, it doesn't take long before John Bainbridge realizes this thing goes all the way to the top, which doesn't scare him. That just means they'll fall that much harder when he takes them down. Part send-up and part love letter to early 90s action films, Bainbridge will take you back to the golden days of Canon, PM Entertainment, and AIP. You can get it in paperback or on Kindle and Kindle Unlimited from Amazon. Follow the link in the podcast description. My newest novel, Don's House in the Mountains, is available now. It follows Don Veazey, who after 20 years has finally made it as a writer, going from an AP English teacher to richer and more famous than he ever could have imagined. In the process, his wife Lois, feeling alienated and resentful of her husband's success, has filed for divorce, forcing Don to move to a house in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. With time alone to reflect, he's able to see how his new wealth and fame has affected his life in ways he never expected. Maybe the biggest of these is his new house, which is bigger and nicer than anything he's ever had in his entire life, but the longer he lives there, the more he gets the sense that it might have magical powers. But that can't be right. A house can't have magical powers, can it? Pick up Don's House in the Mountains today. You can find it at Amazon in paperback and in Kindle. Oh, we're back now. Yep, we're good. Yep.
I think that love scene is very strange on many levels. The first level is that like Eva Pope's character and Jack Foster, Steven Seagal's character, have been riding around Bucharest together for about a day. So they've known each other for about a day, and as is typical in a Steven Seagal movie, she is just completely fallen for him, is smitten with him, straight away. Like by the end at the start of the day, bit of iciness. By the end of the day, completely in love. Okay, so that is that is weird, and then like you said, there's the comment about like you want people to think that you piss ice, you're this kind of ice queen, and then he says the line that was like, but I know who you really are. I know your heart. And I was like, first of all, she's fallen in love with him in a day. Second of all, he thinks he knows her entire personality in the 24 hours they've known each other.
Right.
That this is bonkers. And then and I've seen like Seagal do this before, where like, and it's kind of the same with the earlier section, and the girlfriend is like from earlier is much younger. She looks like she's only in her 20s or something. And then I've seen this in a few Seagal movies where they don't like really do a love scene, or they do a love scene where generally he is clothed and the woman is naked. Right. And then he just like, he doesn't like, sex doesn't really happen. He just does this like weird sexy hug thing that like like that's like his technique. He does like sexy bear hug. And like, and so again, because I've seen that in other Seagal movies, I was like, so is he just hugging her, or is he giving her sexy bear hug like in other movies? Because I remember, I can't remember which one it was, but I remember there's one of the ones, one of the DTV movies he did where like his wife is dead. It might have been Out of Reach, where his wife is dead and he keeps having flashbacks to this scene where she's like naked and he gives her like sexy bear hug on the edge of a bed. Like I can't remember which one it is, but I just remember it. So it's like a recurring flashback, and like so that's his style apparently. So yeah, it's a very weird scene. I think that's my thoughts on that scene.
Well, right, and we don't know too, like you said, like if they do make love or not, right? Because he has his girlfriend technically, right? Which I didn't realize she's actually credited as Jack's girlfriend in the credits.
Oh, okay.
That's I think that's the name.
Apparently, he doesn't really seem to care or think about her the entire mission. So like, right, exactly. I don't know how strong that relationship really is.
Right, exactly. And like you said, the other thing that's weird about it, right, beyond those other pieces and the weird hugging and all of that stuff, is that a few scenes before he catches her in this Romanian club, and I don't know, I guess like they find a back room in the club, but he catches her in the club. And he takes her to this back room, ties her hands behind her, and puts her in a chair. And the idea is he's going to torture her to give him information about his daughter. And he takes like a towel and starts like strangling her with the towel. And, she then the baddies show up, and the baddies like put like a plastic bag on her head to get her to talk, and then he of course comes in and sorts out the baddies, and they run off. Um, but so it's like not only did they barely know each other for like 24 hours, but he also just tried to strangle her, or was strangling her. And yes, maybe there's some sense of her being into that kind of thing, but there really wasn't any look on her. Like she didn't really look like she was into it. She looked like she was in distress when he was doing it, and then the baddies showed up. So there's that piece of it as well. That it's almost like that scene never happened for whatever reason.
That's very true. And like again, like this is one of many scenes where characters flip flop in a strange way,
Yes.
where it basically seems like Jack strangles her, and we are to assume that she has given up the information that she was saying that she wouldn't give up. But then, like you say, 2 seconds later, Russian gangsters come and like put a plastic bag over her head and suffocate her, which apparently does not distress her, and she's happy to be kind of catty and quippy to the Russian gangsters. So like it seems like characters are, she is as strong as or as weak as the script says she is at any given time. There's not often rhyme or reason to the motivations here.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing too with Seagal is that you'd think that like as a man of Tai Chi that he'd have a little bit more elegant approach to getting information out of her. And I don't know what that would mean, like if he could Tai Chi like Spock and like do a mind meld or something like that. I don't know exactly what it would have been, but it just seemed like yeah, for someone who's supposed to be like this elegant Tai Chi master that we get in the early parts of the movie, he's really just kind of just doing. I mean, I would have expected. I mean, I guess waterboarding would have been too messy, but that's essentially where he was going, and that was like essentially it was along those lines of what he was going to be doing to try to get information out of her.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. But I mean, like, it seemed, yeah, it did seem kind of, it did seem pretty cruel and kind of intense for this supposedly heroic character. But like, again, we're on the fence as to how heroic this character actually is.
Yes. Now, one of the things earlier on in the film, Harry, this character Harry, we think that Harry knows Eva Pope's character. We're not sure because they're talking together. But
Mhm.
anyway, Harry, Steven Seagal and Harry, after the explosion, they kind of go together, and Harry sort of stashes Seagal in a location while he goes out to try to get information, I guess, to find out about his daughter. And Seagal gets the sense that, okay, me being stashed here is probably not a good thing. So he does like what most people would do in this situation. He gathers up, which just happens at the place has a lot of gunpowder. Which I guess that's the other piece is I guess if you're going to stash a Seagal in a place, if you're not wanting him to set up a whole bunch of booby traps, maybe take the gunpowder out ahead of time. But I guess Harry didn't have time to think, and so Seagal like uses all this gunpowder just sort of completely mine this entire like apartment. And of course, when the people show up to get him to kill him, they just start getting blown up. And it was interesting because I was expecting him to chi them, like just kind of use a bunch of chi on them and just chi them all away and stuff like that. But no, he went the explosion part, which I guess we needed some explosions in the movie.
I guess we did, and like it's kind of like a fun kind of cheesy sequence because basically he rigs up a gramophone, so when you take the needle off, it explodes. So that's quite good, and also like it's really fun that he basically breaks down the walls and then takes out a bunch of piping and creates a kind of shotgun out of the piping
That's
in about 5 minutes, which is even by MacGyver standards very impressive.
yes. Yeah, I mean, I know he's from Lansing, Michigan, which is a little different from Detroit, and he didn't live there that long. But I would say like people in Detroit who rip out all the copper pipes out of abandoned houses probably can't do it as quickly as he did it here in this film when he does that. You're right. It's very like MacGyver or like A-Team, right? It's like the A-Team montage where they're welding things together and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
that's true.
But it's at least with the A-Team, it's a team, right? Or like even with MacGyver, like he's doing something that like it there's a little bit more to this is just like it's almost like essentially it's like when you watch a movie that takes place in the woods and there's like somebody chasing somebody else and that somebody else who's getting chased somehow has the ability to just like create all of these massive traps and all this stuff and in like very little time. It's like the same idea. It's like one of the magical things about action movies, right, is that time can be very fungible and that like things that normally would take a lot of time, someone can put them together very quickly if it leads to explosions and things like that, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think the kind of kills we get in this scene are fun. The people who get blown up by the gramophone, that's fun.
Yes.
Also, actually, I guess we didn't mention that that he has rigged up this bomb in the gramophone. He has made his copper piping shotgun, and he's also made like a kind of he's also like taped together a couple of knives to make a throwing knife.
Yeah.
So like he and all are deployed. A couple of guys get blown up with the gramophone bomb. He takes out another couple of guys with the shotgun. And then the last two guys, he kills one with the throwing knife, and then the last guy he kills with his own gun. He just grabs his wrist and shoots him with his own gun, which I think might have been my favorite out of all of them. Of just being like, that's got to be, that's got to be humiliating on your henchman grave, killed by own gun.
Yeah, because it's like these henchmen in these Seagal movies. They just and it's not just Seagal movies, right? I think it's like any of them. You watch I'm watching the Blood Fist movies for the podcast and Don the Dragon Wilson. It's like people, the whole point of the gun, right, is that you have the advantage of distance on your side, right? That like the gun can shoot and hit somebody from far away. But it seems like these baddies just like they give up that advantage so easily and they just walk up very closely so that in Seagal's case it's just like, some quick slaps. But like you said, in this case, it was even easier than just like the quick slaps. Like usually it's like some quick slaps and he disarms the guy and then has his own gun. And in this case, like you said, he just turned it around and shot him with it.
It was. I mean, I did. I laughed when I saw it. I was like, because it's just like one quick grab of the wrist, then
Yeah,
turns his gun back around into the guy's stomach, and then just bang, 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 and the guy.
that was it.
I was like, geez, what a way to go.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh, go ahead, go ahead. Yeah,
Oh no, so like again talking about character motivation, something that confused me was like basically they set up Harry as being kind of Seagal's friend, and then they kind of set him up as being dodgy because like he leaves him in this safe house, he phones somebody, then this inept death squad come after him. But then later on in the movie, there's an implication that Harry had arranged for Eva Pope's character Anya to like basically get Seagal's daughter out of danger. And so there's basically an implication that like Harry was like one of Jack's allies all along. So like very and this is after Harry's dead. And also in the scene where Harry and the two other CIA agents, Schmidt and Chambers, I think his name is.
good question.
I think Chambers is the one who like mocks like Seagal's martial arts and stuff.
Yeah,
And then Schmidt is actually played by like there's a number of people in this movie who are like not known names and not even in the UK are like not well known names, but would have been like recognizable faces on television around this time. The guy who plays Schmidt is a Scottish actor called Alex Ferns. Who at this time in the UK would have been known as the character of Trevor in the soap EastEnders. He was like this kind of evil wife-beating character. So he was like kind of one of the big villains of the soap at the time. And then like Eva Pope's kind of just been in many, many different TV shows. She just kind of pops up in things. So again, she would have been like a recognizable face on British telly kind of thing. So yeah, I just thought I'd flag that up. That wasn't really to do with my main point that I was making, but I just thought I'd throw that in there, in case in case you didn't know, or in case you have any UK listeners, it might be fascinating to be like, oh, Alex Ferns is in this. That's kind of weird.
Yeah, actually, yeah, the UK is our second big, according to Spotify. The
Uh-huh.
UK is our second biggest after the United States, or so yeah. So it's so there are
Oh.
definitely a lot of UK listeners. Though interesting enough, because I don't remember the last time when you were on last year, we had a
Mhm.
huge conversation about the World Cup and all that stuff. I think the UK listeners actually aren't big Premier League fans. I don't think there's a lot of overlap on that score there. So I think that the
Oh,
people that I
fair enough.
know that are listening, I don't think are fans. But yeah, when you look at the bios of a lot of the actors in these movies that take, that are made in Romania, they do use a lot of English or UK actors, I think, because it's probably one of those things where it's like easier probably to get them between projects than it is
Yeah.
to get American actors between projects. And so,
It's a
um,
it's a longer flight as well. Like
yeah,
like you could do like particularly before we exited the European Union, the flights were quite particularly at that time, like you could get like cheap flights to Eastern Europe because like a lot of I remember particularly at that time a lot of people would go on stag do's to places like that, like Bucharest or Sofia or Prague or kind of those kind of Eastern Bloc countries.
yeah, yeah.
So it's kind of cheap to get there at the time. So I think that's maybe why they use a lot of British actors.
Yeah,
Um,
and again, like you said, like somebody who's on EastEnders, or like a Imelda Staunton, she plays the U.S. ambassador, and I think that's she was kind of a big name in England, but I think and I guess yeah, she ended up doing the Harry Potter movies, so I guess I don't know if she was doing those at this time actually, maybe
No,
no,
I looked it up because I was a bit like because Imelda Staunton is because like I say, Alex Ferns and Eva Pope are like the kind of faces you might recognize on television, but
right,
probably people don't like necessarily know their name, necessarily. But Imelda Staunton is like a proper, like a proper big star in the UK.
yeah.
So I was surprised that she was in here, particularly because this is not long after she won the Oscar. But I did look up on her filmography to see when she started in the Harry Potter movies, and she started in the Harry Potter movies. It was the fourth Harry Potter movie, and that came out in 2007.
Ah,
So she wasn't in the Harry Potter's movies yet. And then I looked at her filmography. She has not been in a direct-to-video movie after this. This is,
yeah.
yeah.
She said, if you look at the trivia on this, she was not happy with this film, like with the way it was shot, the way it was made, the way it all ended up. I think it must have been one of those ones, and who knows if she still has the same agent after this or not. But I wonder, because this is something that used to happen. Like Uwe Boll would do this in the United States, and I think
Sure.
same,
Yeah.
same with like Randall Emmett Furlow Oasis. They would get to agents and find out who in their pool of actors had time between projects and bang these things out in like a couple weeks. And so I'm wondering if that's what happened with her, where her agent said, hey, you want to go to Bucharest, do this role. It's not going to take a lot. Your scene's probably going to be in a couple days. But you make like whatever, 50 grand, 75 grand, whatever the number is. Maybe it's even more than that. But it's easy money, that kind of thing. And she probably thought, okay, yeah, that's easy money. This seems okay. She probably read the script, and I think she was expecting a different kind of role from when she read the
Mhm.
script versus what she ended up doing. Then it's just like she gets there, and of course, like you said, she's a Melda Staunton, which I don't know her as well, but she's someone that I recognize. She gets there and she's doing her scenes, and she's doing them with a double because Seagal can't be bothered to show up and act opposite her. I'm sure like it just probably left a bad taste all around.
Probably. Absolutely. Although to be fair, I guess like it can't have been like too bad in the sense that it was, according to the trivia, it was only 2 days. So like two pain in the ass days, um, and then like probably a good sum of money. But like that has got to be annoying. But it's like it's like you're filming the Steven Seagal film, but like you're not going to do any scenes with Steven Seagal. You are going to do scenes with Steven Seagal, but we're going to edit them together in a weird way. So you don't actually have to be in it. Because like that conversation they have, where it's clear that they're not in the same room is so funny. Like when he walks into her office and it's just like tight close-ups on both of their faces, like panning back and forward. And you're like, that's clearly they're not looking across the same desk. We can see that. It's quite obvious.
Yeah. And I have to, now kind of we're talking about it more, because there's other actors that he did, other names, that he did movies with, but I think, I mean, like you said, like Imelda Staunton, that would be the kind of name that like I think, she would think like, why am I doing this? Like, what is going on here? Like, why can't this person be bothered to do these scenes with me? And not realize, probably even like a sense of like, who does this guy think he is? This Steven Seagal guy, right? Where it's like, yeah, it's one of the things.
Particularly, I mean, she's just off winning an Oscar.
Right.
Yes, yeah. Yeah. Now she's in some Steven Seagal movie,
Right.
and Steven Seagal thinks he's too big for her.
Yeah, I think you're right. That it's interesting because we always joke about this. That it was like an old MST3K joke as well. That people firing their agents when they're making some of these movies.
Yeah.
I wonder in her case if it was like either she fired her agent after, or she at least said to her agent like, listen, I know I told you that I was good with this, the easy money thing. I'm never doing this again. I don't care if it's only 2 days. I don't care what the role is. I don't care. I will never do this ever again. But she did it once, right? And it's in this movie, and it's such a I mean, she's playing this American ambassador, and it's a very fascinating thing, and it's like you said, in the later Seagal films, it's almost like they use more technology to put him into scenes with other people, and you kind of have to wonder like how they pulled it off. Like they almost do it like those movies where twins are in the same scene.
Yeah.
And this movie, they didn't do any of that. It's really like you said. I mean, the double that plays, I think they said it was like some Romanian kid that they get to play his double in the scenes with her. So when it's not them, and when it's supposed to be somebody, it's supposed to be him standing over and talking to her, it's some kid that they just got in to just be him from behind.
I know it's very strange. I guess like actually one of the things I kind of wanted to ask you was what did you make of the accents? Because all of the CIA agents and the ambassador, obviously, the Imelda Staunton, they're all British, mainly English, apart from Alex Ferrens, who's Scottish. Like, what did you make of the? Because I thought some of them were pretty dodgy. But
yeah, it's interesting. Like, I mean, we have Michael Elwyn from who plays the father-in-law, right, from Wales. It was almost like, is he supposed to be a Brit, or like what's happening here with him? I mean, Imelda Staunton I thought was pretty good, but yeah, there was very much a sense that like, are these Brits or are these Americans? But there was almost too like, one of the interesting things about a movie like this where you get Brits playing Americans is that when it's Seagal and his accents and his voices are all over the place, it's
true.
almost like them. It makes their accents look a lot better, at least, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, I guess like that's if we like go back to our like Seagal rulebook, I guess that's something we don't get either. Like we don't get hilarious cultural appropriation accent, where he pretends to do like a kind of black African American kind of kind of thing, or he does like a Cajun thing, or he does like a vaguely Asian thing, or like he's not doing any of that here. He's just doing like his normal kind of Seagal voice.
He does. remember before the scene when his girlfriend gets naked, he's doing the kind of the black accent there when he's talking to the
Oh,
computer guy, right? Because he's like,
yes, no, he does do that. He
yeah,
does do
'cause
that's right. That's
that has one
right.
of my favorite lines ever in a Seagal movie, and that is he ends the call by telling the guy, "Do your thing," right? And it's like, it's just,
that
oh
that's
my,
that's right. So he does do the black scent, like right at the end of that call. That's true.
yeah. I,
Yeah.
I, I think I joked when I wrote the review that I was going to end all of my calls like that from there. I was just going to be like, "Do your thing," like someone's like, "Okay, talk to you later, man." Yeah, do your thing. It's like, wait, what? But I mean, he was like,
That that is one of the many scenes in the movie that's just like comes out of nowhere.
right,
Like
yes,
it's such like that whole sequence is so strange as we discussed, like the odd interaction with his girlfriend who he seems to barely tolerate, and then he gets this call from this hacker friend who like is like, hey man, I'm just calling to tell you that I can like wipe out your taxes at the IRS. You want me to do that because like apparently I've got time on my hands and I just want to do something for a pal, like and he's like, no, that's bad. Don't do that. And the guy's like, ah, shucks. And then, and then I guess we're supposed to have like a seed planted in their head of being like, I feel like this character might come back at some stage. I feel like this might be useful information. That might be some hacking that needs to be done later on in the movie. And guess what? There's some hacking that needs to be done later on in the movie.
yeah, because yeah, you almost never see Chekhov's hacker, right? Because
No, that's
usually
true.
the hacker is there throughout the movie, right? Like usually
Usually he's
there's like
part of the team, like in a Mission Impossible type of sense.
exactly, like usually like Seagal is relying on him for information throughout the movie, but that's not. It's like the same as like the Tai Chi thing, right? Where he's just like he does it at the very beginning of the movie, and then suddenly at the end he does it, and and again with the hacker we get some of our classic hacker tropes, right? Like which is one, computers are magic and they can do anything we want until they can't, right? And kind of just like what you were talking about with the script, where like Eva Pope's character is weak and strong whenever we need her to be weak or strong. It's like the hacker can get into any place he needs to until we need him to not be able to get in because we need the tension, right? And so then it's like just that whole thing of them like just typing a bunch of stuff and then getting access denied, typing a bunch more stuff, access denied, typing a bunch more stuff, and then it's like, oh, but come on, I need this information, I need it quick, typing more stuff, access denied, come on, man, I can't get through, and then suddenly, boop, the light goes from red to green, suddenly it's like access allowed, and and it's like, it's that whole thing. It's almost like they feel like they have to do that, and it's like this manufactured tension that like is almost more annoying than it is like actual tension, right? Because we know where it's going to go, and we just want to get there.
Yeah, I think like because it's so kind of clunkily employed, and it's kind of so obvious what the end point of this is going to be. That yeah, I again like you, I just felt like we're just like killing some time here.
Yeah.
We're um, but uh, that's like just talking about killing time actually. Um, I love how I listen to the podcast regularly, and I know you talk about all the different types of padding that you get.
Yes.
You get the you get the credit padding. You get all your different types of padding. Well, I think this movie, I've seen this happen before in other movies. This movie has flashback padding
Yes.
because we get a dream flashback that kind of surmises the plot up until the point that this dream happens, and then we slightly later on in the movie we get another flashback as well. So I think flashback panning is always kind of like it's just like you've just literally said, oh, we've got to fill this out to 95 minutes, and how can we just eke it out? Eke it out. We've got the credits, and we need 90 minutes of screen time. We've got the credits filling out the last kind of 5 minutes. So how can we get it? We just push it over to that 90 minutes. What if he just has a dream that surmises the movie up until the point he has the dream? Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always joke when it comes to flashback padding. The joke I always do is Conan O'Brien, the Late Night with Conan O'Brien show here in the United States when he was on after
Yep.
Jay Leno. He would do these like jokes about during Christmas time. He would do like other ghosts, right? So other than like the three main ghosts that Ebenezer Scrooge meets, it would be like other ghosts that we don't hear about as much for Christmas. And
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I remember that. Yeah, I remember
yeah,
that.
and
I've
one of
seen
them was
clips
like
of that. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, there was one that was the guy who works out in his basement, the Christmas the ghost of guy who works out in his basement, and they go down there, and the guy's like kind of lifting weights, and the guy says to Conan, he's like, "So what do you think?" Conan's like, "About what?" He's like, "These guns," and so then like later on, the next ghost is the ghost of recent past, and so he's like, "What? You're the ghost of recent past?" He's like, "Yeah, here, come on, let's go," and they go back to the same basement where the guy's lifting weights, and he goes, "Remember this?" And so that's kind of a long roundabout way to say, like, whenever I see flashback padding in a movie, that's my first thought is, remember this? And it's like, I do. I was here 20 minutes ago when you first showed it. And it's one of the more fascinating kinds of padding because it is essentially just taking the movie. Reality shows really employ flashback padding, right? Because it's like they
Oh
go to
yeah, yeah,
commercial and
yeah.
they'll
They're
show like
full of
five
it. Yeah.
minutes, right? Exactly. But when you see like in a movie like this, it's like, and what's great about this kind of mid 2000s flashback padding is kind of what you were talking about earlier, that they employ this sort of like the actual flashes, and the whooshes and all of that stuff to try to make it seem like it's not just the same stuff we saw earlier, right? That even though it is the same stuff we saw earlier. So I always like that too. That's always dressed up for us.
Yeah, I absolutely, absolutely. And I think like some of the flashback panning, I do think like assumes that the audience is an idiot, like or that they're paying attention to their phone or something, or I don't know because like so we get one of the flashbacks that surmises the film in the dream, but then we get another flashback where like uh, Jack realizes that the father-in-law put the virus in, switched the stylus,
Yes.
and instead of just like looking at the stylus and then just having like, I mean, I know it's a stretch for like Seagal to have an emotion on his face, but like instead of like just having like a knowing look of being like, I get it. We have to have a flashback to the scene where he switches the styluses, and
Right.
it's like, I was watching the film the whole time. It's okay.
Well, because what's weird about that, right, is that like there's no mystery because the movie is showing us that it's happening, right? We see the father-in-law do it. And
Yeah.
what would have been great is they had cut, like they showed him dropping the stylus and then picking it back up and writing with it and then cutting away to the flashback, and then in the flashback we see, oh, he switched them or something like that, like almost like a reveal or something like that. And even though we would have known, right, we would have guessed it from there, but it's almost like they told us everything. It's like, it's I'm trying to think of a good way to describe it, but it's like they they gave it away, and so then the flashback part, you're right, it's like, remember this? It's like you said, yeah, I was there. I saw it happen. It wasn't that long ago. I can, they say, right, that like people, like if you had to describe a person, right, like you probably, like if you saw someone on the street and that somebody asked you to describe them, you wouldn't be able to describe like the color of their shirt and stuff like that. But if somebody passed you on the street and they dropped something, you'd remember that they dropped something in front of you, like that kind of thing. And so
Yeah.
it's like when you're watching a movie, and yes, maybe I wouldn't be able to remember what the suit that the father-in-law was wearing, but I remember that he dropped and switched the styluses. That part I would remember.
Yeah. And like you say, like that might have been fine. Like the flashback might have been fine if it's giving us new information. If like we didn't see the switch in the original scene, but we did see the switch in the original scene, so we're just repeating a scene, because apparently we need to eke out another 30 seconds or whatever of screen
Right.
time to fill us up to the 90 minutes that we need to get up to. Um,
Yeah, and I do wonder. I wonder with the flashback padding because it was pretty egregious in this. I wonder if they thought they were going to get more time with Seagal than they wanted, or if the time they got with Seagal things weren't shot as well as they wanted them to be, and they couldn't use the footage because they couldn't shoot new stuff with him. I wonder if something like that happens, because sometimes that's what happens with these movies, especially when they're trying to get them back from like Eastern Europe and maybe pieces get damaged or something like that. But I wonder, sometimes that's what happens where these directors have got to like cobble things together and like kind of make the best out of certain situations. And with Seagal, you just never know with him.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I was just actually, I was just looking at my notes, and like there is a scene that I wanted to talk about that actually happens even before he like meets Eva. Um, and that is like I think it's actually because I think it's actually the best action sequence in the film because like you actually get a decent amount of Seagal. Like a lot of the action sequences in this, it's like a body double running upstairs and then some shooting happens. Like so it's not necessarily the best, but we do get like this one action sequence kind of I don't know. I would say kind of in the middle of the movie, that doesn't make a lot of sense. But basically, he drives up to this house and he says to a taxi driver, "Tell me where like drugs and women are." And then he drives up to this house and like this action sequence happens. He does not get any new information from the people at this house. The people at this house don't appear to be connected to the Russian gangsters who are also after the virus. So we have no idea why he goes here, and we have no idea why these people try to kill him, and we have no idea why. I mean, I guess we do have an idea of why Seagal kills them because like they're trying to kill him, but we don't know why he went there, and he doesn't seem to get any new information. And then the scene just moves on. And he goes to a nightclub, but it's a really fun sequence. We got this like gangster guy who's sitting on the couch and he's like, "I hate you fucking wise ass Americans," which doesn't seem the best way to talk to your potential drug customers, I guess. But like anyway, he immediately and then like Seagal says, "Ah, you don't like American smartasses, huh?" And then like a fight ensues for no apparent reason. But it's quite a decent fight. And going back to the Seagal rule book, it is a classic Seagal fight because there's a lot of glass involved. Somebody is thrown through a glass table. Brilliant. This is what I watch Seagal movies for. And also, there's like a cabinet. There's like a glass cabinet there for no reason in this drug den. And so somebody is thrown through a glass cabinet. So there's two major glass breaks. So that's a tick in the kind of my Seagal checklist that I have, mental Seagal checklist that I have. And also, there is a scene that is bizarre, where he is beating up all these goons, and then the last goon he beats up has a face mask on. He has a plastic face mask. And apparently the reason he has this plastic face mask is because he got burnt badly during a freebasing accident. So like Seagal knocks this mask off, and then before he like kills the guy, he's like, "That's not a freebasing accident. That's syphilis." Which is one of those lines that's like, it's not funny, but it is funny. Like, it's not funny. It's not like a comedic line, but it's what I assume that Seagal thinks comedy is, which makes it funny to me, if you see what I mean.
Well, right, because one, we have no idea why this guy is supposed to be like scarred or have syphilis or any of those kinds of things, right? Like we have no idea what the point of it is about that. But it's like you got the Seagal like Cajun Ebonics kind of voice where he's like, "That ain't no freebasing accident. That's syphilis." And it's like, wait, what? It's like, what? And I guess it's good that Mitch from Video Vacuum in his review mentioned that it's like good that he got kicked in the balls a lot because maybe he wanted to make sure that he couldn't spread the syphilis to anybody else, which I don't know how much he's really probably doing that, but yeah, it was just so, like you said, it was so out of nowhere that it's like, and too, like again, like with the mask, right? When the guy's wearing the mask, like there's only two reasons for someone to wear a mask in a scene like that. And one is because you want to use an extra stunt double and not have to worry about people thinking they saw the same guy twice. And then the other is you want to show some gross scarred face and like make a point of showing that. And so you knew it was going to be the latter probably because it was just one guy in a mask, and it was like, okay, they're going to do this at some point. But when it happens, you're right. It's like there's no other reason. Like, why did this guy have syphilis? Like, what? You know, I, you know, I- yeah, none of it made any sense. It would have been kind of funny if you made a joke like, yeah, like, Ben Franklin, famous American, had syphilis as well. You're just like our famous, or I don't know. It was completely out of nowhere because you're right. Like, it almost feels like the whole point of that scene is just to get us to a place where Seagal can throw people through glass tables and glass cabinets and all that stuff, which is, like you said, is something that we want. And the other thing too is we get the Euro trash baddie there, played by Werner. What's his last name? Werner Dane. I think that's I'm saying it right. Who he was in like Triple X and stuff like that, and he just he's a German who just people just take as a Euro trash baddie. So it's like he's sitting on the couch like just ready, just like building up the Seagal's got to beat me and my friends up kind of thing, and he's like doing it really well. And so it's like the syphilis thing just made no sense because everything else there is just standard Seagal fare.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I say, the like it doesn't like connect to anything. It's not funny. But I just feel like it's something that like Seagal, like I don't I can almost imagine like Seagal putting it in the script and kind of laughing to himself, being like, I think I've done it. I think I've cracked comedy. Like, but it's just such a weird one line. Of course, the other thing I guess I should mention about this scene, which again is insane when it happens, but it's pretty hilarious actually, is like Seagal steals some money from these drug dealers, and like when he does this, he steals it from a big table from
Yes.
this little woman who's doing the accounts, and then she just and she's made up in this like really nerdy way. She's got the big glasses and all that kind of stuff like that. And then she just pulls a machine gun from under her desk, and like this woman makes the real best use of her one scene in the movie because she just screams her head off and is just firing this gun willy nilly, probably killing her own people. And she's just like, "Wah!" It's like, my God, like clearly that woman had fun on set that day. Like she really made the most of it, of the screen time she had, and I'm here for it. I'm here for it. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, because it looks like she's as an actress, she's like an older Romanian actress, and so
Yeah.
I wonder if even like just having her in that scene was almost like a nod to the fact that they were shooting in Romania and they could do that. But it's amazing because you're right. It's like what is she doing there counting the money? Like, why is she there? Why does Seagal go in there to see her? And then he just takes like some stacks of bills and she's not like, don't take that. What are you doing? Why would you, any of that stuff? She just kind of just keeps going like what she's doing. And he walks out of the room and then she, like you said, she pulls the gun out and starts screaming and shooting everywhere. And it was like this random thing. It was almost like something like you'd expect like Jean-Luc Godard to do or something like that. Like in going back to like Bucharest as Paris or something like that. It was just so out of nowhere. And yeah, it just made the scene even more amazing. I guess it's like it's talking about like the flashback sequence being like a dream sequence. You could have had Seagal just wake up on sleeping on the couch fully clothed with the big shirt on and all that stuff. Just wake up and be like, "Whoa, that was a crazy dream. I don't know what happened there." And it would have made more sense than what we actually got in that scene.
Absolutely, because this whole scene, this whole action sequence, again, I do feel like this is one of those things that they realized they needed to pad out the running time. They maybe thought they didn't have, because there there is action in this movie, but again, it's more concerned with being this kind of convoluted, kind of spy thriller type thing. So maybe they got to the end and realized, oh, we don't have quite enough action. We need to insert another action scene into this film, and so they threw this in. And I have to say, I'm pleased that they threw it in because I think it's one of the more fun action sequences in the movie, but also it baffled me. I spent the rest of the movie thinking like, how is this connected? Is that gangster? Does that gangster know the Russian gangsters? That doesn't seem to be the case. Like, what information was gleaned here? Did he get some information to know that the club that Eva was at? Like, did he just need some extra cash because he was running low in cash? Like, what was the point of the sequence? I don't know. I didn't figure it out. I haven't figured it out. I watched the film yesterday. I still haven't figured it out. But it was fun to watch. And like there is the like and this is the things that I think make this kind of still quite fun, as opposed to like I think that Mercenary for Justice was a bit more of a slog. It kind of took itself quite seriously. There wasn't as much kind of surrealism as you get in a lot of Seagal movies. But this movie had like a decent amount of just like surreal scenes that you're just like, what the fuck did that happen? Like 2 seconds after, actually 2 seconds after this scene, he goes to a nightclub to find Eva. Um, no, not Eva. Anya. It is played by Eva Pope, but like the character of Anya. He goes to find the character of Anya, and he like questions a barman. And the barman is like, no, I don't know anything about that Anya lady, and he clearly does by the kind of shiftiness in his eyes, and basically, uh yeah, and then 2 seconds later, Jack spots Anya
Right.
and realizes that the bartender has lied to him. And then what he does is he slaps him hard across the face like some disapproving 1950s dad.
Right.
And then we never see that bartender again.
Yes. Yeah, it's amazing. Like, you're right, because you think he's gonna like do something like, because a lot of times in those movies, either you just give the disdain to the bartender, or maybe you do something like really bad, like slam his head into the bar or something like that. But no, he slaps him. It's just like, okay, that's what we're doing here. And then then he goes and chases Anya, and again, it's that club scene, which again, that sort of that prerequisite Eastern European movie, we've got to have the club scene, where all this club stuff's happening. I think the other thing too about the club scene is that it creates like sort of the saloon bar thing from the Western, but also now, thinking about it more, it also has an excuse to have scantily clad women. And
That's
I
true.
guess, because I guess Eastern Europe, right? You don't want them outside too much because it's cold out, a lot of times. But in the club, because clubs, I guess, are very warm inside, you can have women with barely any clothes on, and they're dancing up on the stage and stuff. I guess they also do that in movies in Thailand too, right? You have to like have those scenes in Thailand of like the whole prostitution thing, and like the Thai women dancing for white men kind of thing. They kind of do a similar thing, but with Eastern Europe, it's more of like a Russian mob kind of thing. And so, yeah, it's just, I guess that, you're probably never going to see the hero slapping the bartender in another one of these Eastern European discotheque scenes.
No, absolutely not. And talking about Eastern Europe as well, like I read from the trivia that apparently the Russian gangsters, when it comes up, obviously I only speak English, so I don't know any Russian. But obviously, when they're speaking Russian, it doesn't come up any subtitles. Unlike the Romanian, when it speaks Romanian, it comes up with subtitles. But when the Russian gangsters are speaking Russian, it just comes up speaking in Russian. But according to the trivia, those guys are actually speaking in Serbian, not Russian.
Oh, oh, interesting. That kind of makes sense, actually. That's awesome.
So, so, so which I found hilarious. I was like, I wonder how well this movie did in Russia, where they're like, these Russian gangsters aren't even Russian.
Right, that's a good point, because he was always trying to sell. And I mean, I wonder if he started paying more attention to those things later when he became more entangled with Russia.
Yeah, maybe.
But at the time, right, it was the Russians were probably watching this going like, yeah, it's funny because you never think of like, you know I don't think I've ever watched a movie in another language that when they spoke English, it wasn't English. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like, like, oh, that person's definitely not speaking English there, and he's supposed to be. Like, like that kind of thing. You would never see that in a movie. So it is fascinating to think about that happening in another film or in another language.
Yeah, no, it is pretty fascinating. Like, I think like I think about it more as well in terms of like the randomness of this movie. That there's other scenes that like really stood out to me, just for being random. Like when the kind of corrupt cops first like bring Seagal's character into the police station, like they question him, and then he's like, fuck it, I've had enough of your questions. And they're like, you've had enough of our questions when we say, and he's like, no, I've had enough of your questions, I'm walking out. And then they try to stop him, and he just beats the two of them up, and they are the only two cops that we see in the movie, and he just walks out the police station. And I was like, are they the only two cops in Bucharest? Because it kind of seems like it sometimes. Well, I know later on we see other cops, but like there's points in the movie that they do seem like the two cops in Bucharest.
Yeah, it is again kind of more like again of that Wild West idea, right? Of like the two sheriffs in town or something like that. And it is weird, and it's like there's almost this sense that when you're screening to American audiences in particular, I think there's a sense that American audiences aren't as worldly and they kind of accept
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of ideas. And so this idea that like, okay, Americans would just think that like, yeah, of course Seagal could just walk out of like a police station in Romania. And like you said, there wouldn't be any like uniformed officers, at desks or anything to be there to like, sort of help, or even just not even just the fact that there's just the two cops there, right? And he beats them up. But even if there were some like maybe 5 or 6 uniformed officers that he could like have like given the chi effect to and just like blown them away or something, would have been a little bit more than like kind of the lackluster approach that's there at that station.
Yeah, for sure. Because like we don't see like other cops until like later on in the movie. We get some car chases and stuff like that, and we there's like two cops who are looking are kind of stationed at Eva's apartment. Well, Eva Pope's character's apartment, Anya. And then yeah, but like at that stage, it's just like there's a bunch of scenes where it just seems like they're the two cops who are around, and like you say, it's quite weird because then it makes it seem like this kind of like small backwater town or something like that, or village. And it's like, I know that like Romania is a slightly poorer country than like, Western European countries or America or whatever. But Bucharest is still a major city, like it's not like some backwater village, it's a proper city, like
Well, right, yeah, because I read a book recently called The Dean's December. It was a Saul Bellow book. And he wrote it, and I think in the late '70s, early '80s. But it's about this character who's a professor in the United States who he marries a woman who's like he's like a journalism professor, and she is a physics professor, I think is what it is, or astronomy or something like that. But anyway, her mother's close to dying back in Romania, and they go back there. And this is, of course, during the Ceausescu period, so it's not a fun place to be at that time. But despite the fact that it's the Ceausescu period, they always present Bucharest as, the writer Sal Bello always presents it as a big city, right? It's not like he tries to pass it off as like a backwater. Of course, it's more of the interplay at that time, which would have been different. But it you're right. Like there's a sense of like again, I think it's kind of going back to what you were talking about, how the movie needs to be what it needs to be at that time, right? For whatever the convenience of the plot is. And so it's like, okay, for the convenience of the plot, this police station only can afford to have 2 detectives working at it. And that's all for that scene. But later, when we need more police officers, they're there whenever we need them.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that like I also maybe think as well. It is, there's many kind of fun or funny sequences, and there's a couple of car chases in the film that are quite hilarious because there's like such a disconnect between what's happening inside the car with the actors and what's happening outside. Because like basically we outside, the car chase is like pretty decent, pretty solid stunt work from the stunt drivers there. But then when we cut to inside the cars, there's like just bad even for 2006 green screen happening going on. Um, particularly when I think it's like Harry, like pops his head out a window to try and shoot somebody, and like the green screen there. Oh boy, oh boy.
Yeah, it was like 80s music video kind of green screen, right?
Oh
Like it's
yes,
like
yep,
it's like
yeah, yeah,
Falco in like Der Kommissar kind of green
yeah.
screen is what you're seeing in these, and it's like, and also Seagal driving. It's like he, for whatever reason, his hands have trouble like manipulating things. Like he has trouble using a cell phone. He has trouble typing. I don't know what it is about his hands that like he can do martial arts with them, but he can't do anything else. And like the driving thing, it's almost like he's driving with his wrist in some points where he's like trying, and
It's weird.
and you can't see the same person who's like, having trouble manipulating the steering wheel, making these evasive maneuvers around a small, essentially, like you said, European city with roads that are not really meant for uh, evasive driving like that, unless you're really, really good. It made no sense.
Yeah, I know. It must be really difficult. I think it must be really difficult to film a sequence like that, where you're like, obviously, the actual stunt work is done elsewhere, and you've just got to act as if you're in like a car chase with
Right.
like just green screen behind you, and you just got to kind of bump up and down in your chair and kind of jostle about and kind of like it must feel absolutely fucking ridiculous.
Yes. It's funny. I actually remember seeing so there's that show Bones. I remember
Oh
that
yeah,
show.
yeah,
um
yeah. David Boreanaz.
But exactly. And there's the woman who's one of the forensics. It was like kind of a woman with dark hair who's like younger, who had like kind of a smaller part as one of the supporting cast.
Hmm.
I remember, I don't know why I remember this, but there was a documentary series that she was on about actors trying to get roles as actors. And I guess because I don't know if she's of Asian descent, I think is possible. She was auditioning for a car, a car commercial that was airing. I don't know if it was in Japan or Korea or something like that. And so she was with like three other people that were in what was supposed to be a car, right? But essentially, it looked like, from our angle, it looks like a boat. They're just sort of sitting in this thing, and they're supposed to act like they're dancing and having fun in this car when it's just sitting there. And it is kind of amazing to think about, like, the kind of magic that's done behind the scenes to make this thing look like it's something real. And of course, in her case, they're four starving actors just trying to get the part as best they can. Whereas with Seagal, right, Seagal's just happy that he's got a sit down role, and he just doesn't care too much if he's trying. I mean, I think the scenes with Ava Pope and the girls playing his daughter, they looked a little bit better. But it is like you said, it is kind of amazing that there's a lot of magic that has to come into it to even make it look somewhat believable. And if you have certain people, if the green screen's not right, like, that's one piece of it. But then also, if the people involved are not like really pulling their weight, it all falls apart really easily. All right, so yeah, so Scott, anything else about Shadow Man that you wanted to mention?
Oh yes, I guess like I guess we should mention because I know you often have him on Will from Exploding Helicopter on the podcast. I guess we should mention that there is a bad CGI exploding helicopter
That's a good point.
that happens in the film that is very funny. Like,
That's a good point, because I wonder, because so I've had him on before when we did a movie. We did a Ring of Fire 3, which was a Don the Dragon Wilson film where he shoots down a helicopter using a pistol. And I wonder how many, I have to ask him, like, how many times a character's used a handgun to fell a helicopter. But that's what I mean. Seagal doesn't just shoot he just like keeps shooting constantly at the helicopter too. It's like he's just not quitting until that thing goes down.
yeah, no, I absolutely. He's absolutely committed. He keeps kind of shooting towards the propeller blades, and then eventually it just blows up in some kind of pure CGI. So it was very funny to watch. I
It,
guess like the other thing I should mention as well, again in this kind of like this movie's kind of like I guess these are the heroes, is Seagal's hacker friend.
Yeah.
shuts down he shuts down the MK Ultra program that produced this virus that everybody um, has been chasing, which Seagal quickly resolves, because he just kills the CIA agents, kills the Russian gangsters, and kills the father-in-law who comes back from the dead from a poor explosion earlier on. So it's all resolved very quickly. And also, like I say, his hacker friend shuts down the program, and I think we're led to believe executes like 6 scientists.
Right.
Which I was like, I guess they did bad because they made the bad virus, but they didn't seem evil from what we knew. I'm not sure how I feel about this. But
Yeah.
anyway, I guess. But then we cut to a final scene where we're having a picnic. His daughter gets a horse. There's like a freeze frame of Seagal smiling, and we're all just supposed to be off. Happy on our way home, I guess. Like that's or wherever we may be.
Yeah, the freeze frame was ridiculous because that was just like old 80s sitcom kind of thing. Like movies that end on that freeze frame, I always kind of wonder like what is going on there. They can't just do a good fade out. Now, one other quick thing I wanted to mention is a trope in action movies that I can't stand.
Mhm.
And this one definitely dialed it in. So it's when Ava, right, she needs to ditch Seagal's daughter, put her in a safe place so that she can go and do other stuff. And so of course she puts her with a friend. The moment that friend agrees to help her, and I think I don't know if it was like a friend or I think it was just a friend, but the moment he agrees to help her, he signed his death warrant. And
Yeah,
there's this
absolutely.
thing about these people helping the heroes in these action movies that just end up getting killed. And I don't know why it's a thing. I don't know how it's supposed to. I mean, at least in his case, it's a little different because Seagal didn't ask him to help. A lot of
Mm.
times it's like the hero actually says, "Hey, I need your help with such and such thing." He's like, "Yeah, I'll help you out." And then 2 minutes later, the baddies come and shoot that person up, and they're dead. I've never understood it. I've never understood why it's the case, but it's just always, and it's especially in a situation like that. It's like that same thing with that Ring of Fire 3 movie that I was talking about with Will. They Tom the Dragon Wilson's character has a son. They put him with a farmer. That farmer's dead. It's like just a matter of time before anybody who helps the hero gets killed. It's just a weird thing, and I don't know why action movies do it, but they all have to do it.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely one of my less, well, probably one of my least favorite tropes. Maybe not my least favorite, but down there. Um, Definitely because I think it it's almost placed there to kind of rub the audience's nose in it a little bit, because often in this case the the friend who helps out is in a wheelchair, and and I feel like that's often the case. They deliberately make the character who helps out either super innocent, or maybe a bit naive, or vulnerable in some way, either physically or mentally, and then we kill that character as to um it's like a kind of cheap shortcut to an emotional punch. It's not really earned. It's just they're just kind of pulling the rug from under you to kind of give you that emotional punch, but it doesn't land because you can see through it. It's so transparent of what the filmmaking is trying to do.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's funny. Like I was watching Blood Fist 7 for the
Hmm.
the DTVC extra series. Same thing. Don the Dragon Wilson's got a friend who's in a wheelchair, and that friend offers to help him out to look up some information, stuff like that. And sure enough, the baddie shows up and kills him. And you're right. I think that's another piece of it. There's also almost like a survival of the fittest element of it too. Maybe that's not good. I don't think there should be a survival of the fittest element. Like we want, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
but there is almost like that sense too, like Seagal's big and strong, nobody's going to kill him, but the guy in the wheelchair, yeah, he's primed to get killed by these baddies who pick on the weak, kind of thing.
Yeah, I do. I think it's maybe a cliche that's maybe not used quite so much now, because I would say that there is certain action movie cliches that have like kind of died a death, and particularly there's certain ones I think it's good that they've died.
Yeah.
Like my absolute least favorite trope of action movies in the like 80s, 90s, and kind of even into the 2000s is where the hero has like a girlfriend or wife who is sexually assaulted by the main villain or one of the main henchmen of the main villain, and then this sexual assault is never kind of connected to the woman. It's always connected to the hero, and like it's just like inspires him to take out the villain even more. And then by the end of the movie, it's not mentioned, and the wife or girlfriend has immediately got over the trauma of such an experience because our hero has won. And like that is my absolute least favorite action movie trope.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely correct that that one has gone away some because I think when I see it now, when I watch some of these older ones, it's much more visceral when it happens. Like it's like, oh wow, this is really, really happening here. Whereas like nowadays, it feels like for example, in Seagal's case, right, where he's the
Mhm.
white knight in a lot of these situations, the character is almost raped or almost assaulted, and he comes in to save the day before the bad part happens. Where it's like almost like in these older movies, you're right, like it was either used as a way to create the revenge factor, right? Like the hero is going to avenge his woman's honor,
Mhm.
or like in some of them, it was almost like a way that the woman would have the revenge factor, right? Like she, like there's a lot of times there's that scene where the woman who was raped has the gun and she like just keeps firing and just shooting the person who assaulted her like and it's like a that kind of thing at the end. And I think maybe it's just just more like enlightenment in the sense that more people understand that these are very traumatic things and it's not something that just sort of people get over at the end of the movie. And granted, like I don't think if the woman's a damsel in distress, she probably wouldn't get over that so much easily either, being held at gunpoint and tied up, restrained or whatever. Like probably wouldn't go over well either. But at least like I think there's a sense of like, okay, if we have that kind of level of sexual assault in a movie, it's strong. It's a powerful thing. It's like another thing too. I think people don't even, like the word rape isn't. It used to be like it would be used all the time. Like I remember like in
Mhm.
the 80s and
Yeah.
90s, playing video games, people would be like, oh, that, that I just got totally raped by the game or something like that. And like that kind of terminology isn't used as much anymore. So I think it's maybe part of the changing times that people realize like, okay, these are not things to not things to have lightly in the movie. Whereas, like they know now if you put something like that in the movie, it's going to be a really powerful thing. And only to really have it there if you want something that powerful.
Yeah. And like it's something that you just can't present in a throwaway way. And I
Yeah.
think maybe we've learned that because, like, I know, because obviously in these action movies, there's lots of deaths, there's lots of spectacular kind of kills and stuff like that. But in terms of like creating gunplay and in creating violence, that is like you can make it in such a way that is so detached and fantastical from our actual lived reality that it doesn't feel real, but you can't film a sexual assault that way.
Yeah.
It will always feel real. So you always have to take it 100% seriously.
Yeah, you make a great point because one great example of that is RoboCop here in the United States, where there's that scene where Ed 209, right, kills the the guy, the guy in the suit, and the Motion Picture Association in America made them edit that to get an R rating. And so when
Mhm.
you watch the edited version of it, it's much more visceral and scary. Whereas when you watch the unedited version, it's cartoonish and it
Mhm.
kind of conveys what the movie was going for. But it also, like you said, it's so detached from reality that you have fun with it almost. I mean, because it is meant to be comical in a sense.
Yeah.
That yeah, like when you get it like that, I mean, the thing that I also kind of now with the mass shootings that happen here in the United States is like I will watch a PM entertainment film where like, some baddies come in with some Uzis and just like, massacre 10 people in a car repo shop, or a police station or something. And it's like, in those 90s movies, when you'd watch that, be like, that's just so outlandish and ridiculous that, you get a kick out of it. But now it's like, oh, there's actually a reality to that these kind of shootings actually happen now. And so it's, I wonder kind of the way, the way those sexual assaults were treated, and now, we kind of don't put those in the movies. I do wonder if there'll be a change even with that here in America, where it's like
Mm.
when you're making a movie, and somebody goes in and kills 10 people, that maybe you don't do that kind of thing now. Maybe it's just, the bank robbers don't massacre everybody like in a PM Entertainment flick, but rather, they don't use that kind of violence, because now it is more real in America than when it used to be, when, 80s and 90s, it was so outlandish that you wouldn't even think about it.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, yeah, for sure, for sure. It's I guess I guess it depends how you present it. I don't. There's possibly still a way to present that in a way that doesn't really connect with our reality, and still feels kind of too cartoonish and detached to kind of take seriously, and you can still have fun with. Like, I think you can still film violence like that in a kind of like commando way, like where you're like that, none of this is landing as like affecting the violence isn't affecting me, because like it seems too outlandish, too cartoony, too like unreal.
Yeah. Well, because the other thing too with Commando, right, is that it's like Commando, he's taking out like all of these stunt guys who have weapons themselves.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's people that are shooting back. And so it doesn't quite have like the massacre feel, even though maybe he's killed like 30 or 40 people throughout the course of the movie. It's almost like it's like 30 or 40, like one-on-one or one-on-three, two, three, whatever battles. And they're all, like they're all baddies in that sense. And it's like, I think, yeah, it's that kind of thing is just like, that's probably always going to be, or like I said, the Ed 209, killing.
Yeah,
It's
so something like
RoboCop.
that. It's
Yeah,
just like in a kind of dystopian future and stuff like that. Which again, like it gives that like extra level of disconnect to the reality of it. Yeah.
yeah, and I think you're right that in that sense, like, there's no way you can make those kind of assaults the same way that you can with the the murders, or that those kinds of, that kind of violence, that you can cartoon it, make it so cartoonish that, like, yeah, it's, or like, like, I mean, Die Hard's another great example, where it's just, even when the yuppie gets murdered, right, it's almost an applause scene, right, as much as it's like a very serious scene, where Hans is there with
Mhm.
the gun, and he gives him the soda. Guy's like, Hans, baby, come on, I can help you out here. Da, 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 da. Bruce Willis is like, get out of there, go. You gotta, don't go, just leave that guy alone, and then Hans kills him. It's a funny kind of applause kind of scene. That, like, yeah, I don't think you can do. There's probably no other kind of like, film element that quite works like violence does for that kind of goofy, but like, I don't, yeah, there's something about that you're right, that's probably always going to be, always work in a movie.
Yeah, I think so. I believe so. I mean, I might be wrong, but like I think
Yeah.
so.
There might be, yeah, that those kinds of scenes, I think, especially too when they're connected to like the past, like that too, where it's like that guy was playing such a character from the 80s that, like, there's different versions of him now, but there's not as an 80s version like that existing out there nowadays there to, yeah, to play that part.
Yeah. No, 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 for sure, for sure. I mean, like, I think like there is obviously very of the time, very 80s, but like you still, I think you still always like have characters like that in action movies, where you just get like an annoying, shitty character who is not like one of the villains, but is just like a shitty character that you want to see, like at least like slapped in the face or something. I think if you were making like if you're making like a Die Hard now, or if you're making a like a Die Hard knockoff now, like that character, that yuppie character would today be a crypto bro.
Yes, yes. Yeah, and that would be a kind of a hilarious scene with the crypto bro, who's like, dude, my, my check out, if you get my whatever coin and it's like worth this much now, I'll get you like however many shares of it, all this stuff. Yeah, and then you've got like
Yeah.
our whoever's playing our Bruce Willis hero is like, don't trust, get out of there, go, it's like, then, yeah, then
Stop trying to sell your NFTs. Get
right,
it.
exactly, yeah, get the hell out of there. So Yeah, that would be perfect. Well, yeah, and maybe that's a good place to leave it here. I don't know if we had anything else on Shadow Man. I'm trying to think if um I think we got everything, right? I think I'm trying to I
I
think I've
think
got
I think we pretty much covered. I think we pretty much covered everything. I think I
yeah.
pretty much covered everything that I had like in my notes. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, I think for people out there that are curious about Seagal's DTV stuff, or I imagine probably a lot of people listening to this have seen this one already, because I think
Probably.
this is like prime Seagal DTV, and I think, but what's interesting about it is that while it hits all the spots of what you want from Seagal DTV, there's so many weird things happening in it that make it also a lot of fun too, which I think also helps.
Yeah, I think that's what like a lot of people like myself come to these like Seagal DTV movies for, is like just for the Seagal checklist, like, is somebody going to be thrown through glass? Are we going to be told that Seagal's character is the greatest man who ever lived? All these kind of things that you have. Are some risks going to be broken?
Right.
Things like that. The checklist is never ending. Is he going to do like a funny cultural appropriation accent? Um,
Yes.
Which he kind of I kind of forgot that he kind of does at a couple of points. He kind of
Yeah.
actually does do it here. But yeah, no, there's some like just some weird randomness, just some weird. There's some scenes that come out of nowhere. There is some characters who kind of come out of nowhere, and there's some very kind of random lines, and we get a uh, couple of like classic Seagal awkward kind of lovemaking scenes. It's got all the things that you want, and like despite what Outlaw and Vern said about this being one of his more boring outings, I think that like it's actually still pretty fun. It's still pretty fun despite being objectively a bad film.
Yes, exactly. Well, I think that's the thing, is that there is enough goofiness going on between the standard Seagal tropes and then this outlandish stuff that makes no sense. That and again, you're packaging this all in an hour and a half, and so I mean, there is some flashback padding, which I think can be annoying maybe, but overall, I think you're right. I had fun with this one for sure, and I think for people looking for Seagal DTV, one of the things here in the States is actually it's not on any of the streaming sites, which it's kind of surprising. And maybe it's because it doesn't have any names outside of Seagal in it that are American
Could
names. And
be.
so maybe here they just don't think, though it's interesting because it does have somebody from a Harry Potter film. So, you think maybe they try to get on that Harry Potter action, but you never know. But it is one that people should seek out. I think if you haven't seen it before or haven't seen it in a while, I think this is kind of that fun 2000 Seagal, that DTV Seagal, that when people think DTV Steven Seagal, this is the kind of movie.
Yeah, for sure. I'm very much on the same wavelength as you there. Yeah.
Definitely. Well, yeah. As we wrap up, Scott, anything that you wanted to plug?
Yeah, I guess. So like I've got the two podcasts. New Horror Express is my interview podcast where I talk to horror movie directors, writers, actors, all sorts of different stuff. I'm actually kind of wrapping that podcast up. Basically, I've got two episodes in the can that I recorded some months back, but like there's been a bit of a delay on them. So I've got two episodes left, but I'm going to keep the podcast feed up. I'm going to keep the website up, newhorrorexpress.com. There's roughly around 180 episodes for people to enjoy, around 140 of which are interview episodes, and then there's other ones where we cover guilty pleasure movies. There's some that are kind of festival roundup episodes where I looked at like Fright Fest and Grimfest one year, and yeah, there's a couple of other kind of random bonus episodes. So that's New Horror Express, which again you can also find on Twitter, Facebook, wherever podcasts are provided, and on the Morbidly Beautiful Network. Most of the episodes are there. And then there is all 90s action all the time. Again, there's been a bit up and down in terms of scheduling because I had some health issues. But we're hoping to get back on a kind of monthly schedule in 2024. So again, you can get that kind of wherever podcasts are provided, and also on the Last of the Action Heroes podcast network. And yeah, if you want to contact us, you can. We've got a Twitter handle or X handle, whatever you want to call it, at 90s Action. We're on Facebook as well. I think I think that is. But and also, the very last thing is, I on and off have done music reviews for a long time. I had stopped writing for about a year, but I've started writing again. I've got a Substack, and that Substack is called Notes from the Musical Underground, where I'm looking to cover just bands who are kind of flying below the radar. Because I'm a big metalhead, it'll often be metal bands, but it won't always be metal bands. I'll try to keep a variety of it, just trying to hit up kind of acts that I'm vaguely familiar of or not familiar with of at all. So hopefully discover new music that way. And unlike a lot of Substacks, because I'm currently doing it only fortnightly, it's completely free. There's no paid subscription tier at the moment. But if I start pumping out more reviews, then maybe I'll consider paid subscriptions at that point. Hopefully, this plugs has not gone on too long. You've not all fallen asleep. But that is all from me.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. No, I think that's all great. And one thing I wanted to quick follow up to on your all 90s action all the time. Last year, I was on your podcast talking about Batman Returns, and so
right.
that was a really fun conversation. Actually, realizing as we're talking about that it's Christmas time as we're talking now, but this episode's going to air slightly after Christmas. So that people probably I'm hearing sirens going off here in the background if you can hear that, but yeah, but that was a really fun conversation talking about Batman Returns, which was one that I always think of as a Christmas movie, but it is very Christmassy, and it's one of those, I guess, what they call what like non-traditional Christmas movies. But it's kind of one of my favorite comic book movies as well. So that was a fun conversation.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, I was. So, yes, anybody listening to this, check out Matt's episode of All 90s Action all the time. Batman Returns episode, one of the best movies we've covered. It's a great movie. It's one of the best comic movies ever. It's also one of the best kind of alternative Christmas movies, and it's a fun conversation. So you should check that out. And people listening to this should look out for. We will have an episode of All 90s Action all the time coming out in, I think, April, which will also feature Matt, and we at that stage later, later in 2024. I think maybe it'll come out like April. I said, we'll be talking about Highlander 3. So you'll definitely look out for that, because I'm sure that's going to be a fun chat.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk Highlander. So that'll be exciting. And yeah, and I think this episode, I mean, getting back into Seagal, I think it's always a fun conversation. And I think one of the things about this movie is it kind of showed me why people are fascinated by him and kind of come back to the podcast episodes that have Seagal in them, because again, I think people just want to make sense of this stuff and maybe even make sense of why they're enjoying it. I think there's a sense of like when you take this thing in pieces, right? It doesn't make any sense why you enjoy it, but when you put it all together, it's a very fascinating thing. So yeah, thank you again, Scott, for coming on. This was a really fun conversation.
No problem. Happy to come on. You're the only podcaster crazy enough to have me on 4 times on your show. But anyway, I'm very grateful that you think I'm good enough to come back.
Yeah, absolutely. We we're stuck in on the Seagal thing. So granted, if it's like 3 or 4 a year, we'd be talking like 10 or 15 years to get all the Seagal movies in. So I don't know if I'm hoping I'll be doing the podcast that long, but who knows? We'll see. But anyway, yeah, so we've definitely got a lot of Seagal to go for sure. And I think this stuff is just, I think it's just, it never, there's going to be ones that we run into that are going to be not as much fun as this one, but this, for what this does, it does the trick for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to the next one, whenever it may be.
Absolutely, same here. Absolutely. Well, thank you everybody for listening, and yeah, we'll talk soon. And I guess kind of going on the theme of the show, do your thing.